Hey, what's up, everybody?
And welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 320. And today, you guys are in for a treat. We have a special guest joining us for today's episode, Derrick Levasseur.
Thanks for having me. 320.
Yeah, 320.
It's a lot.
I know, it is a lot. We're going for 1,000 is the goal.
Yeah, we got a few years to go on that.
Keep kicking them out then.
Yeah,
exactly. You got to pump it. But yeah, we're so excited to have Derrick here. We've been wanting to do this for so long.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, we really have. We recorded an episode with him on the sesh, actually, that's already went out last week, about Big Brother, because obviously a lot of you guys probably know him from the true crime space. He does a lot in the true crime space and actually was a former police officer and a private investigator, still has a private investigation firm today, which we will talk about. But yeah, he was also the winner of Big Brother.
Many moons ago, yes.
Many moons ago.
It's been 10 years?
10 years, yep. But I have a way of always getting myself in there somehow, so they don't forget who I am.
Yep.
You know?
That's kind of smart,
we were on
honestly.
last night.
I mean, listen, I'll take what I can get. All 30 seconds of it.
Well, I loved it. It was great watching your season. We had an awesome interview, so if you guys want to check that out, we'll link it below if you want to know the Big Brother tea. But today we're talking about a case that Derrick had worked on, had actually done an episode of, remind me.
Breaking Homicide.
Thank
yes.
you. It's an excellent episode. We will have that linked below as well if you guys want to check it out and see him in action. It's a whole series. You guys did 2 seasons of that show. 2 seasons,
yeah. 2 seasons. First season, I'm with Dr. Chris Mohandi, who's a forensic psychologist. He's unbelievable. Second season, I'm out there on my own.
Yeah. I was actually shocked to see it's just you and some cameras.
I was petrified.
And just going solo.
Chris, for some personal reasons, it wasn't even their choice. His kid was a little older. He wanted to stay home with him. And so I said, okay, cool, no problem. We're going to bring someone else in. And yeah, because it's always nice to have that person.
Totally. You need somebody
to
kind
having
of
an off day or you're not feeling it, or it's an interview where the person just responds to the other person better. Or like you said, like you need someone to kind of have the dialogue with.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, no, we think you got this.
Yeah.
We think you got this. And I was like, I appreciate the confidence. In my head, I'm like, I don't got this. But it worked out well.
No, you got it. You did
It was
great.
okay. It was okay. It worked out well. They let me bring on a guy from my PI firm, Frank. I can only say his first name because he works a lot of undercover for me still. But Frank came out. He traveled the country with me, got to kind of be my eyes and ears and sit on some different houses, run some searches for me. So they didn't leave me completely empty-handed. I had Frank, and he was a huge help.
Yeah, you need that. You need at least somebody. So
yeah.
But yeah, we're taking a look at one of the cases from that you covered on that show. Really, almost solved. It should be a solved case at this point.
Yeah, we're kind of referring to it's unresolved.
Right, unresolved. Yep, absolutely. And that's a lot of these cases. We were talking about it off camera, where it's not all these cases are a whodunit, or you just have no clue who did it. There's a lot of politics and bureaucracy that goes on behind the closed doors, and egos, as we were talking about, that come into play where people all want to make sure that they're getting their credit. And I feel like there's a lot of cases like Judy's where it just needs to be pushed one extra mile. We're almost there. We ran the marathon. We got 1 mile to go.
Yep.
And it perplexes me that I'm sitting here with you guys. And it's frustrating that I'm sitting here with you guys, because I do think this case has been solved. It's just a matter of, we need the justice system to do their part now. And we need to go to trial. But here we are.
Yeah. All these years later. Did you think by now?
Yeah, I made a promise to Tammy that I would do everything I could, and I think this podcast is part of that. Like, it's continuing to do it. You know, that was in 2019. Yeah. And I never promised them that I was going to solve it. I just said I would do everything I could.
Yeah.
And so when we started talking and you were like, hey, what cases do you have in mind? It's kind of like my kids. Like, I don't want to choose just one, but this was one that, has always stuck in the back of my mind, especially as a father myself.
Yeah.
And so when you gave me that option of choosing, I'm like, well, you know what? Let's start with Judy, because I feel like if there's an opportunity to talk about her more, we should do it. And I don't think a lot of your listeners or viewers will have heard this case before unless they've watched Breaking Homicide. Yep. I've never covered it on Detective Perspective or Crime Weekly.
Oh yeah.
So this is a first.
Yeah, there's literally no other coverage besides Breaking Homicide.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's a really important question, because I think there's some debate out there about why do we cover these types of cases? Like, as somebody who was in law enforcement and you've been through all of that, and then afterwards in the private sector, and just dealing with especially cases that have gone cold or going cold, how important do you think continuing to talk about these cases actually is? Like, do you think there's value in doing that?
100%. Because not only is there value in talking about it, but having a fresh set of eyes look at it is imperative. Don't take my word for it. Long Island serial killer. Why are we talking about Rex Heuermann now?
Yeah.
There was no epiphany in that case. There was no new information.
Right.
It was a new detective who didn't work the case originally, having the opportunity to go in and look at the evidence. And through that, he found a report that had been taken at the time of the disappearances that connected us to Rex Heuermann.
Yeah.
Allegedly. But it's important that we continue to talk about it, because whether you're in investigations or you're doing podcasting, your perspective on it, you may say something that I've never thought about before. So having these conversations is extremely important. And then also the reach that you have. You know, I'm new to the space. You guys are the OGs here, but the reach that you have with your platforms and the ability to get movement in those cases, also with things like your foundation now, we can make a difference, not by just talking about it, but actually doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really great to get it out to people who aren't aware. Sometimes even people who live in the area. And sometimes you never know if someone has a tip out there or something, you know, it's you got to keep it alive.
Well, I was going to say too, I can't tell you how many times when we've covered a case on the podcast that people comment, who are listeners, viewers, and are like, I live in this area and I've never heard of this case
all
before.
the time. Almost every episode I do. Yeah.
Which is crazy, because then that just shows you that the police department's not doing a great job at vocalizing their needs around cases, and then the local media is not doing it as well. So somebody's got to do it at the end of the day.
And listen, I'm pro law enforcement, former law enforcement, but not all police departments are created equal.
That's very true.
It's no shocker to anyone, right? But like, you got to call out the good police work and the bad police work.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of these cases, not all of them, but there's a reason that 50% of the homicides in this country go unsolved. And it's not all because the criminals are so smart we can't catch them. Sometimes it's that the police officers don't do the right thing, or don't allow people who can do the right thing to come in and take a look at it. So we can't solve them all at once, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't just continually try to knock them down one by one. And I think Judy's one of these cases, and I'll say it's going to frustrate a lot of you that listen to this and watch it. And
it's infuriating.
And you guys hadn't heard of it before, and you watch the episode and you're like, dude, what the hell? And that's the reaction that everyone has. And the sad thing is, this isn't an isolated incident. It's pretty prevalent. So
it's way too prevalent.
That's the problem.
Which it's like, what do you do about it though? And that's the most frustrating thing. Yeah. All we can. That's it.
All you can do. I mean, you're not going to change the system. I think it comes down to legislation. I think it comes down to accountability. I do think with social media, it's getting a little better, but we still have a backlog of so many that were done. It's more likely now that cases are getting solved because of science and technology. But those older cases that we're discussing, it's because, let's be honest, you could have a high school diploma and basically know the guy down the road and you're getting hired as a cop.
Yep.
And so you could become a detective just through attrition, not because of skill set.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that's the case for all of them, but I can tell you my own police department, there were people that worked above me that I wouldn't allow to work my cold case.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's just the reality of it. I'm not talking shit. I'm just, that's the situation.
No, I think
again, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, everyone's going, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like any job though, right?
Yeah.
Like not all lawyers or doctors are created equal. You're not, oh, you're a doctor, I'll let you open my heart up and check it out. It's you want to find the right one who knows what they're doing. And in some of these cases, it's just a matter of getting it to the right person, putting enough pressure on it, and using the latest science and technology and funding if necessary to just push it over the edge.
Yep.
And we were saying it before we started, and we're going to talk about it tonight, but why not take the shot when the case is 10, 15, 20 years old? That is cold by all accounts. What do you have to lose? Take the shot, because if you wait too long, the person responsible, when you finally find them, may be in a wheelchair on their way out.
Yep.
Did you really get justice at that point?
Often. Right.
I don't think so.
No.
If that was my child, I wouldn't be happy with that. So that's a perspective, the lens I kind of look through it now as a parent. Like, what would I want to be done? If I was Judy's father, I would want the shot to be taken now, yesterday, but I can only do so much.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. This is from 2001, by the way.
2001.
2001, Judy Rawlings. And we will go through the entire case here. Before we get into it, I do want to talk a little bit about you, Derrick, just for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure tons of our audience knows who Derrick is.
You have a big audience. I'm sure a lot of them are like, who is this guy?
Well, you're missing out. You've got to get on the Derrick train here, because you are just fantastic.
Thank you. You guys are great too.
I mean, it's really refreshing to see someone like you in this space who truly cares. You're in it for the right reasons. You're passionate about these cases, and that just shines through so much.
Thank
and
you.
I'm really honored to have you here today, especially with all the experience that you have. I mean, it's rare to have. I guess now there's more people in the space that actually have worked in the field, but it's an added element, I think, for people to hear from people. Like your show is called Detective's Perspective, and it's excellent for that reason to really hear from someone who really knows. So you have several podcasts. You do Crime Weekly with Stephanie Harlow, who we've also had on the show. That's an excellent show, as well as Detective Perspective, of course. You have your Big Brother podcast, which you haven't been on.
Winner Circle. Yeah, I took a season off this year. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. But you're also the CEO of the Break Investigative Group.
Yep.
Tell us more about that.
So Break, we're mainly focusing now on, we do a lot of civil cases, wrongful death lawsuits, insurance fraud. We do a lot of mortgages and foreclosures. We do a lot of air searches. But the main thing that I'm focusing on right now is we just brought in 2 genealogists. We're really focusing on genetic genealogy and solving those cases, because what we're finding is we can get the funding for the actual DNA testing, but then doing the IgG of it is difficult, because just like cops, not all investigators are created equally.
Yeah.
So I found 2 great guys, Jeremy and Ryan. They're on the website, and we're working in conjunction with the coffee company to fund the case, but then also use our genealogist to try to connect the dots between the DNA and somebody's DNA who's currently in the system, where we can figure out whether it's a victim's family member or hopefully a suspect's family member. Connect the dots, solve the case.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Criminal Coffee too.
Yep.
I think that's so cool what you guys have done, where if you don't know, Derrick and Stephanie have Criminal Coffee.
Yes.
Which is great coffee.
Thank you.
Love it.
Thank you.
But not only that, for every purchase, you are helping fund cold cases, which is just so cool. A great way to use your platform.
Solved our first one. Go check that out. It's on the website. We solved our 60-year-old case.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's a really cool case, actually. So 60-year-old case out of Ohio. They find a doe. They didn't know at the time. I'm saying doe for a reason, but they find this body on the riverbank after a flood. These children find it, missing an arm, missing a leg. And through a forensic anthropologist, they determined that this person is a female in her 50s. So they spend the next 30, 40 years trying to find a missing person, a female that would match this description, be from that area. Nothing. So I hear about this case through Intermountain Forensics out of Utah. They had this case. They had tried to fund it before. They had done some DNA testing, but just didn't have enough to get it through the edge, because there's a first round of sequencing that you'll do, but then there's more sequencing you can do, but the more you do, the more money it costs.
Yeah, of course.
And it's the dollars and cents of it. I understand they got to move on to other cases.
Yeah.
So we came in, it was our first case we wanted to fund. We fund it, and we fly the bones out to Intermountain Forensics. They do the DNA testing, and now with the newer advancements in science and technology, they figure out they referred to this woman as Preble Penny. That was what the case was called. Find out it's actually Preble Peener. It's a guy.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So the whole time they were looking for a girl, and it was a male.
That's crazy.
And so we figure out that it's a male. We get his DNA, and then through IgG, through the genealogist, we find out that his name was Albert Frost. We find living relatives, and we're able to inform them of what happened. He was a military veteran. He had some issues with substance abuse over the years and had a couple petty crimes on his record. My best guess is that he had got involved with some people. He maybe did somebody, wrong, and there was some retaliation there, hence why the arm was missing. It was potentially a homicide, but the first step was identifying him. Now that he has his name back, the family knows what happened to him. He was going through some mental health issues, and that's 90% of the battle. The other 10% is finding out what happened. And now the police department, with this new information, can reverse engineer it and maybe potentially figure that out. So this is all from a coffee company.
That's incredible.
Right? And
Congratulations.
that's why when you created your foundation, it's like, you're a podcast creating this foundation, but we can have a real impact on actual cases.
Yep.
Because take away the podcast, again, we're just a coffee company. They don't know us.
Right.
So all we did was cut the check, but then bringing in the genealogists, that's what took it over to the finish line. So it's rewarding. It's only one. We just funded a new case. We'll be announcing that soon, but we can only do as many cases as we can sell coffee. So the more coffee we sell, more cases we solve.
You heard it, guys. Go buy yourself some Criminal Coffee. We'll have that linked below, as well as all of Derrick's other shows and social media, so you can keep up with what he's doing. He's excellent. Seriously, one of the best in the true crime space, in my opinion. So Definitely.
And her opinion's super valuable. Like,
It
honestly,
is.
I'm not biased at all, but she might be the smartest person based on that comment, you know?
That's exactly
I'm totally joking.
Managing your finances can sometimes seem time-consuming and complicated, and for a long, long time, there wasn't a great tool to help you out with that. Well, today I'm here to tell you about Rocket Money, a personal finance app that not only helps you manage your finances, but it also goes out and finds and helps you cancel unwanted subscriptions that you may have. It also monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I've been a paid user of Rocket Money for the past 2 years now, and I absolutely love the app. I actually pop onto it almost daily to check on my finances and my budgets and all that kind of good stuff. And my God, was I paying for a lot of subscriptions. And there was even a few in there from like 5 or 6 years ago that I had completely forgotten about. And so you want to make sure you can keep track of those and really make sure you're only paying for the ones that you actually use and want to continue paying for. So Rocket Money makes it super easy. And actually with a few taps of the screen, I was able to have Rocket Money go out and cancel those for me. And what's great too is they'll even go out and negotiate lower bills for you. You can upload a picture of a bill, a utility bill, and submit it to Rocket Money, and they will do their best to go out and negotiate a lower rate for you. They'll also give you the dates for when those withdrawals are being made from your account, which is really helpful for just budgeting and all that kind of good stuff. I mean, Rocket Money pays for itself every single month. You can try it out for free, but then they have a great option to pay what you think it's worth. They have a little slider. I think it starts at a minimum $3 a month, which is really a no-brainer if you ask me. I mean, it's a great tool. It's going to ultimately save you money in the long run. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, and it saved a total of $500 million in just canceled subscriptions alone, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's features. So stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/milehigher. That's rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Check it out today, rocketmoney.com/milehigher.
Okay, well, shall we dive into this case? Because we have so much to ask you. I mean, there's just a lot to go over here.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start. Well, first of all, can you tell us how you initially found out about the case? What made you want to look more into it, and then eventually go and record?
So this was season 2. So season 1 had already came out, and we were a new show, so we didn't really have a lot of submissions.
Yeah.
But season 2, we had a lot of submissions. And I believe it was from a resident at that location. It was not from Tammy Schmidt, Judy Rawlings' mother, that said, hey, listen, we had this young girl, 16 years old. The whole community, it's a small community. It really tore us all apart because there were multiple suspects and multiple people that they thought were involved. She was killed in a brutal way. And her mother just is like walking around still, just wondering what happened to her daughter. And it doesn't seem like anybody's doing anything. So that's when I started looking at it. There wasn't a lot out there available about it. So I reached out to the Randolph County Sheriff's Department and kind of let them know who I was, let them know I was former law enforcement, let them know I was a licensed private investigator, and I was hoping to look into it. And at the time, Sheriff Seabolt was a new sheriff. He had just been elected, and he was looking to get back into the Judy Rawlings case. He had campaigned partially on it, saying, hey, listen, we really want to solve this. So he was all for it. So he said, yeah, come on in. We're going to give you access to everything. I'll get in touch with the investigator on the case now, and you got access to whatever you want. And I was like, that's great.
Go.
That's best case scenario, really.
But as we will go through this series, this case tonight, it changed a little bit, but we made some headway on it. But initially they were very receptive to us being there. And yeah, we went down to Asheboro, North Carolina and dove right in.
Let's start by telling the audience a little bit more about Judy and, the scenario. We don't want to, it's going to be a little different than our typical episode because Derrick's here and we want to hear from him since he experienced this for the most part. But Judy Rawlings was born in 1985 and grew up in Sophia, which is a really tiny community near Asheboro, North Carolina. She was described as being an adventurous teenager who just wanted to make everyone happy. Her mother, Tammy, and her sister, Tiffany, said that Judy was, quote, the sweetest sister anyone could ask for, and was the clown of the bunch to keep everyone happy. So you actually spent some time in Sophia with their family and obviously had many conversations with them, probably on and off camera. How did Tammy, Tiffany, and other group members speak about Judy?
Nothing but great words for her. She was a kind, gentle soul. The one downfall, if you will even call it that, was that Judy trusted everyone. She just kind of looked at the best in the people around her and didn't really see that there are monsters amongst us, and you have to be careful about who you hang out with. But
she was so young too.
Kind soul, 16 years old.
Yeah.
Had the opportunity to speak with some of her friends as well. And yeah, they were just all very, very fond of her. She had a lot of dreams, aspirations, none of which that she ever got to live out because of some scumbag. But yeah, it was talking to Tammy. It's always tough. I only had one daughter actually I had two at that point. I had two daughters at that point. Sorry, Peyton. I didn't forget about you. And they expect you to solve it. Right. And so I'm really cautious about overpromising because these are real people. They're not characters. And you guys know this from covering these cases all the time. We're not making these stories up.
Yeah.
And so she sees these cameras, she sees me, and she's thinking, oh, this is going to be it.
Right.
And so I try to set expectations. All I can promise you, I'm going to try as hard as I can. Yeah. I'll exhaust every resource I have. And I'm hoping I get you some answers to at least push this ball forward.
Yeah.
Can't promise you it, but I'm going to do my best. And you could see it in the interview. You guys saw, I mean, she carries that burden every day.
Yeah.
Because you start to question yourself. What could I have done differently? She was working, right? But you start to question, like, if I were here that night, this wouldn't have happened. And you can't do that.
Not? Yeah.
But you can't do it because if it wasn't that night, it could have been the next night or the next night. And if it wasn't that person, it could have been someone down the road. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You can only do your best, but you can't. And I tell all the parents, you can't hold yourself accountable for it. No. You're not responsible. The person who did this is.
Right.
And so, yeah, I got to spend some time with them. I don't spend too much time with them because I want to keep myself in a position where, regardless of where the case takes me, I can go and I don't feel an obligation to fall one way or the other. And part of the reason I say that is because in some situations, I'm going this way and it comes out that maybe the parents or some family member is involved. I don't want to feel like I can't explore that. I'm there to try to be as impartial as I can be.
Right.
And if I'm friendly with them and I feel like there's this relationship there, that's going to potentially cloud my judgment. So I meet with them, I get what I can out of them, and then I continue on with the investigation. I'm only there for 7 days.
Yeah.
This is all done in a 7-day period, 12-hour days. So,
well, you did a whole lot in those 7 days.
Yeah, it took years off my life, but we're on the move. We're on the move for sure.
Yeah. So were there any stories that Tammy and Tiffany were able to tell you about Judy? Like maybe some little things that didn't make it into the episode, but just for people to connect with her a bit more?
I won't lie. It's been a long time, but I do know she was a big fan of, she was a kind of a tomboy a little bit. Like to ride 4-wheelers, ride her bikes. Yeah. It was kind of more of a rural area. Cool. Yeah. Not a huge group of friends. She was a little apprehensive of people. She always thought the best of everyone, but she was someone who, I want to word this correctly, but she was someone, because she always saw the best in everyone, it was easy to manipulate her. And from talking to her friends, there were other people in that community that would do that. They would bully her or try to berate her a little bit in order to get her to do certain things. And what you'll find is that's kind of what led to where we are today, why we are where we are, because she found herself in a situation where she felt peer pressure. She wanted to be liked. She wanted to be part of the group, and that may be part of the reason what happened took place. And again, not her fault, but because she wasn't maybe listening to a friend that was there, it put herself in a situation where these individuals had the opportunity to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah. God, it's
But again, we're talking about a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, I was going to say, like that's most 16-year-olds.
Exactly. That's me. That's me still to this day.
I was going to say that's me. I always see the best in people, and you just want to.
Think about everything when you were 16, like in that age, you're like everything's unicorns and rainbows.
Oh, totally.
So she, again, small community. Everyone knows everyone. She, just like any young person, you want to be liked. You want to be part of the cool kids, and she was no exception. But just an amazing, young, beautiful little girl who found herself hanging around with the wrong people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've heard that she was terrified of the dark.
That's right. Yep.
And she was normally pretty cautious and like wouldn't stay out.
That's right.
Past
street lights came on.
Yeah, she was home. Unless she had like a friend to walk her home or something like that. But that brings us to her next door neighbors, Tony and David Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
So
they live in the same
trailer park.
Trailer park.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he still lives in well, he did. He still lives in a trailer park when I went down there, yeah.
Can you describe for our audience like where in relation to Judy they lived?
Next door.
Okay,
Literally.
so like, but
Yeah.
like,
Literally like next door. Like could see their front door. Like the way this is all going to go down is you have a situation where Judy's going home for the night and they're outside the trailer.
God.
So they ran right into him. And they had approached her earlier in the evening and she said no, I'm not going to go. And they weren't happy about it. But once they were at the trailer and her friend was dropping her off and they were like, oh, come on, just a little bit. That was the last time her friend saw her.
Did they have a reputation in the community, like a negative reputation before this all happened?
Troublemakers, but not something to this extreme.
Okay.
I would even, for not trying to give them any credit whatsoever, but they were a little older than Judy. I believe they were 17 or 18 years old. It might have been 18. So they were known for trouble. They were kind of the rough guys. They would ride around their four-wheelers at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. But petty crimes maybe, but nothing this significant.
Yeah.
Now, as time progressed and they get older, the crimes become more heinous. There's I don't want to get too far ahead of here, but there's a lot more to those guys that we found out later in life as they got older.
What did Tammy think about them before all this happened?
Wasn't a fan of them.
Yeah.
Wasn't a fan of them. Didn't like her hanging out with them. Could see that they were trouble.
Yeah.
Had spoken to Judy about them in the past. But parents, you guys are going to figure it out soon. It's one of those things where you can tell them something, but ultimately sometimes they have to learn on their own.
Yeah.
And usually the consequences are not this severe.
Well, you're not thinking about that either.
No.
You kind of are, feel a little bit invincible.
That's
when
right.
When you're young. And you're not thinking about the worst case scenarios because you just don't have the life experience.
That's right.
And you don't also know who you're dealing with. And if you're hanging out with two guys that are, maybe are, the cool guys or, they're always up to the fun stuff, riding four-wheelers around and everything. And again, I think the context of this being a small town, this is just kind of how life is.
That's right.
There's not a lot of things to do. It's not like there's movie theaters and shopping malls and stuff.
Not in this area.
Yeah. It's like there's very, very little to do for teens. So teens oftentimes get into trouble a lot. I know this firsthand because I grew up in a real small town and I know that it just, drugs, other illegal activities, it happens quite a bit. And then it's up to the individual to decide, do I want to be a part of that crowd or do I want to, potentially, take another route? But it may not be the fun route. And then it also may not make school fun for you as well because you're kind of on the outside.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult situation to navigate. And, I can only imagine Judy, I mean, it must have been just so difficult to navigate, do I want to have fun? I want to live my life, but also thinking about, some of the warnings from her friends and things like that. It's just, and things just kind of happen in the moment and develop and you just never know what you're going to get into. And it seems like she had no idea what was in store for the night of October 2nd, 2001, when all this happened. So if you kind of go back to the morning of that day, it was just like any other day. Tammy left their home to go to a doctor's appointment in Greensboro, which is about 30 minutes away. Judy, like we said, was 16 at the time in 9th grade. She went to school as she always did and said her goodbyes like any other day. So when Tammy returned home later that day, Judy was already gone. And Tammy's mother and Judy's grandmother had said that she had given permission to Judy to go on an ATV ride after dark with Tony Sierra and his brother. And will you talk about, because it seems like there's some conflicting statements around, had she done this before with these guys, or was this the first time that she had gone and done this after dark maybe?
I think she had ridden with them before. I mean, one of the main photos that I had in my little folder that I kept when I was down there working was a photo of her on a four-wheeler. So I don't believe she owned one. I think she would use theirs, and they were sharing the vehicles and stuff. But
and that's what Wyatt said too.
Yeah,
which we'll get to.
I think they were riding all the time, and you're right. And as you get further, they had been seen riding around before. Again, I think it was a very small community. Everyone knows everyone. They were outdoorsy people. They're out there riding their four-wheelers and bikes and stuff like that. In the woods, unless you know the area, we'd get lost. But if you're familiar with it, there's a lot of cool ATV trails back there, some really fun stuff. But with David and Tony, I would even go as far as saying on this particular occasion, I don't think there was premeditation. I don't think there was an intention there. We'll get
I would
into the
agree.
specifics, but something went down which led to this. But I don't think when they were asking her to go ride the 4-wheeler, this is what
There was
their
a whole
was.
plan
No.
being executed at this point in time.
Nope.
And before we go further, Ian, can you pull up the map? I thought maybe we could just kind of try to give the viewers or the listeners like a sort of an understanding of the lay of the land here and significant landmarks, Farlow Oil, trails nearby, stuff like that.
This is going to be a flashback for me too.
Yeah, it's been.
I walked all those woods.
Yeah, so I mean, this is we have Farlow Oil, which we'll get to.
Yeah,
he's a very important landmark in terms of Tony's alibi, of course.
For sure.
And then that landmark down off of Groom, that's Marsh Mountain Road. That is where they lived.
Yep.
Then that other one, 1864 Groom Road, is the closest address to where her body was found, according to one newspaper article I found.
Yeah, it's buried in there. There's nothing going to tell you exactly where it is. It's buried in the back over there. Danny Cecil, who we're going to talk about too, the rancher, he was pretty close by. His property was probably one of the closest to where she was found, and there were different items found at different locations, which we'll go over. But unless I had Mark Brady, who we haven't mentioned yet, and I'm skipping all around here, so I apologize. But unless I had the original investigator with me, I would have never found it. There's a stone angel where her body was found, but even with him, it took us probably 30 to 45 minutes to find the exact spot because it all looks the same.
Yeah.
It all looks the same. There's an ATV trail, but she was off the ATV trail. So it's an area that it's not frequented a lot, and which kind of goes into where my theory on this case is with the ATV trail being right there. Again, another coincidence, but it's really in the back of the woods there. I think people still go back there and visit it because I found a lot of beer cans and cigarette butts and all these things. So I think people do go back there, probably not always for the right reasons.
Yeah.
But unless you're a local, and this is important, unless you're a local, you would not know this area. And if you take anything from what we just said, that's probably the most important thing is this is not something that a transient would find, especially at night. Impossible. I had trouble finding it with the investigator during the day.
Yeah.
So you go back there at night, there's no chance.
Tammy reported Judy missing a few days later after the second on October 5th. And there's like virtually no information out there as far as like, what did they do when she was reported missing? Like, did they provide any of that to you? Were you able to find, like, I assume they went and searched.
They searched the woods. Yeah.
And looked a good amount.
They, from what I understand, again, not there, but they did search pretty extensively, but you're talking about a needle in a haystack. So I don't really fault them for that. It would have been difficult to find her because not only was she in a remote area, but she was covered as well. The offender or offenders took some precautions and covered her with tree limbs. So unless you were standing right over her, you wouldn't have found her. It would have been very, very difficult. But I do wonder if they had dogs out there. I'm assuming they did. But not all dogs are created equal. They could have walked right past her. So it does look like they did a search. They knew that she had been last seen in that area of Farlow Oil. So it would have been something that they would have looked in all directions, but she was a mile if you're staring at Farlow Oil, she was a mile off into the woods, but there's a big area of woods to the left as well. So they're not going to be able to focus on that one specific spot. So to do a grid search in that area and cover it all, it would be near impossible.
Yeah, and we're talking about what's the sheriff's office look like down there? Like how many officers they have?
Not huge. That's a good question.
Yes.
I would say maybe 40, 50 guys, if that. I might be overselling it. It's an established police department. It's not one or two people.
Yeah.
They got a couple units and stuff in there. I mean, they're pretty put together. You know, they're a legitimate place, but I know that they had family members and friends and residents from the community helping out in that search as well. But it wasn't until much later when decomposition takes place where they were able to find her due to the smell.
They have a homicide unit, right?
Yep. Yes, they do.
So they definitely deal with homicides.
They have them. They have some
now
problems
and then.
down there. Yeah, it's not. They have some issues in that community, especially with the trailer park. Methamphetamine's big down there and stuff as well. Yeah, they had guys who were assigned to this particular area, homicide, but how many they're doing a year, they're not New York.
Yeah.
But
right.
So they're limited in their experience and also limited by the time as far as science and technology.
Right. Perfectly said. So Tammy obviously is going to ask Tony because she finds out that Judy went with Tony and David.
From her grandmother.
Right.
Had filled her in. Yeah.
Right. And so Tony's alibi was that him and Judy went and rode ATVs until about 11 p.m. And then Judy told him to drop her off at Farlow Oil, where she said she was planning to meet somebody else.
A guy specifically.
Yeah.
And to go back too, it's very strange that she even chose to go with them that night, since she is afraid of the dark. And this is pretty out of character for her to go on this late night ride.
Yeah. It wasn't too late when they started the ride, because she was originally with her friend Stephanie Hinchman.
Right.
And they had came to her earlier in the evening, David and Tony, and said, hey, come for a ride with us. And Judy reluctantly said, no, I'm not going to go. And they were pissed about it, and they sped off. When Stephanie walked Judy home, they got almost all the way to the door, and they were standing outside, and they were like, hey, we're hanging out.
Yeah.
And that's when Stephanie was like, do you want me to walk you to your door? And she said, no, I'm going to go with him. So it wasn't dark yet, but Stephanie later told me that night she heard the four-wheelers around 11:30. So I imagine that they were riding for a little while, a couple hours, driving around. So maybe it was starting to get dark. Mm-hmm. And for all we know, Judy was like, I want to get home. But back to what you were saying as far as meeting this man at Farlow Oil, if we're to believe what Tony's saying, it would be dark.
Yeah.
And she was petrified of the dark. And Farlow Oil, I've been there. There's nothing else around it. There's not a lot of street lights.
Right.
So to think that this young girl would say, hey, just drop me off here. I'm going to meet this guy. And by the way, nobody was there when he got there.
It closes at 9.
Yeah, it's closed. There, yeah. It's closed and nobody's around. And he would just drop her off and take off. And it doesn't make sense. It's possible. I got to acknowledge that it's possible. But based on who we know the victim is, it doesn't seem like something she would do.
Well, and was there ever a name or
nope
for this man? That
nope.
She was
and even talk to Stephanie.
Right. And you would think that she would know. Right. She'd be like,
nothing.
Oh, yeah, so-and-so. It could have been this person.
If she was planning on meeting a guy only a couple hours after Stephanie was dropping her off, do you think she might have said, yeah, later tonight, I'm going to go meet so-and-so. I got to get home and change. I want to look pretty or whatever.
Yeah.
Nothing. Her plan was to go home and stay in for the night. There was no meeting another person.
No. So, completely fabricated.
I think Stephanie, of all people, would have known if she were going to meet up with someone afterward.
Totally.
And that wasn't the plan. She was deciding to hang out with Tony and David, which Stephanie acknowledged. She was the last person other than Tony and David to see her.
Oh, and her interview in Breaking Homicide broke my heart. She
has a lot of guilt, even more than Tammy.
Yeah,
because she keeps saying, if I had walked her inside, we wouldn't be here.
But it's not your fault. You don't know what you know until,
She could have walked right back out.
Well, yeah, and it could be any other night that this could happen.
Yeah.
So,
But as her friend, I can see just
it was tough. And I always give people a lot of credit for coming on a show like ours, because you don't know what our intentions are.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know who I am. So they come on, they do the show, they expose themselves to this.
And to the audience too. You never know how they're going to perceive you, but she did it for Judy. And
that's why she did it. That's why she did it. She's like, if there's anything that I can say that may trigger something, I'm going to do it. Even though every time I talk about it, it just makes me relive that last moment where I was like, you sure you don't want me to walk you inside? She's like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. She's like, I just wish I would have at least stayed and hung out with them.
Yeah.
But hindsight, right?
Yeah,
you never know.
Of course. But yeah, living with that would be incredibly difficult. I just really feel for her.
According to Tony, he drops Judy off at 11:30 and then he returns home after or around midnight or so.
Yep.
And according to him, he saw his parents in the living room and then went to sleep, which this is very important. We'll talk about this a little bit more here in a bit.
It's in the report.
It's
in the report as his alibi from law enforcement when they interviewed him.
So they just took this, wrote it down, and were like, well, check it out.
You saw it. I put it in the episode.
Yep.
That's what I read. That was his alibi. And, I'm going off face value. I'm thinking maybe there's more to it, but I'm looking at it as, okay, yeah, it doesn't look good for him, but he has a solid alibi. And I don't think if Stephanie heard the four-wheelers at 11:30, Tony saying 11:30, he's home by 12, it's possible it still could have happened in that half hour, but it does create some questions. That would be a really small window. So initially I really went down there thinking there's something up with this guy, but at the same time, unless there's something wrong with this alibi, I don't see how he pulled it off. I don't think how this all happened in that short period of time.
So obviously you got all the case files.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because we have no idea. You're the only one who's looked at them, but how much documentation was there of this whole incident? And did they talk to Tammy at all and get her, ask her about was there any reason she'd be out that late? Like, was the fear of the dark in the documents?
All of that was in there. They did do a very extensive investigation. I'm not going to sit here and say they didn't. There was boxes, and they gave me the boxes, and I was surprised they did. There was recordings. They brought Tony in. They brought David in. They did interviews with both of them. I can't remember if they interviewed his mom. I want to say they didn't because of what was found out later, but
because you did.
Yeah, I got her on the phone, luckily. But they might have talked to her briefly, but clearly there was a break in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there hadn't been, then I wouldn't be there. Right. So something got overlooked. So yes, they took this seriously. You got a lot of people who see this young girl from the community. She's missing at this point. They're pulling out all the stops, but I don't know if the vetting of Tony's alibi wasn't done enough, because again, if it had been, there wouldn't have been this moment where I uncovered some things. But it's something where, unfortunately, it happens more than I care to admit. But in many instances, it's a matter of that one thing that's overlooked that can be the piece of the puzzle that solves the case. I always say this: if criminals were smart, we wouldn't catch them. They usually make mistakes. Our job is to find those mistakes. There was mistakes here. Detectives missed them.
Is it possible, though, that at that time period, they lied and everybody knew what was going on? And
you're saying as far as them knowing it was Tony and David?
Right. And well, not necessarily law enforcement, but just like family members, and maybe they helped make the alibi sound, you know what I mean? And then told investigators, oh yeah, no, that checks out. I was there. Which again, I mean, they could go verify. It's very possible based on
that they talked to Tony's dad was deceased when I went down there, but it's very possible, yes, that they had spoken to the mom. Maybe it was just a verbal thing. The other problem you have is back then, again, I say it like back then, like it was so long ago, but it was like they weren't using like databases, like digital
trails and stuff. Yeah.
Reports weren't on Microsoft Word. They were written documents. So I'm going through like case notes. And like it's chicken scratch, and it's like from different investigators, and I'm trying to piece it together chronologically what happened, because there's not like just one uniform place where I can go through and look at all the pages that have been uploaded PDF. It's like literally I'm looking at stuff like this, and a lot of it I can't even read the handwriting. So I'm talking to producers and everyone else like, well, can you make out that word? Who would they interview here? But it's very possible based on how it wasn't put together in an orderly fashion, that could also allow things to be missed. But yeah, to your point, they might have asked, I think I have her name right. Lisa Spencer was his mother's name. She's still alive, actually. It's very possible were you home? Yeah, I was home.
Okay.
That's possible.
Right.
They didn't actually vet it, didn't go check with their employer. And then, sometimes people, if they don't tell the truth, they forget what they said originally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, either way is possible. But let's fast forward to, about 2 weeks later, on October 19, 2001, at around 7:40 p.m., in a field, and we've been talking about this already, but in a field off the ATV trails less than a mile from Farlow Oil, her body was discovered, covered up by some tree limbs and other foliage. It looked like there was definitely an attempt to conceal her body.
That's right. Yep.
Based on what investigators said when they got there. So you want to talk a little bit about what they saw in your conversations with the detective?
So it's two hunters. They were out there hunting, raccoon hunting, and they smell what they described as a smell of death. And they thought it could be an animal, whatever. So as soon as they start smelling that, according to them, they find a shoe, actually. They find one shoe. No, I apologize. They find a purse.
Right.
They find a purse, and they open it, and it's Judy's purse. So they step back out and they call law enforcement because they know there might be something here. They smell the smell and they find this purse. Law enforcement comes in. They start searching the area. Now they have a more concentrated area to search. And within a couple hours, they find her. Her body was badly decomposed. The weather had been tough over that past 2 weeks. It always happens that way. It's hot out. Actually, it was in October, so it probably wasn't too hot, but it is North Carolina.
Yeah.
Hot enough during the day, at least. I mean, we're in October right now. It's pretty nice out. So they find the purse, which was 100 and 150 yards away, more closer to the ATV trail. They find one shoe near her body. They find her, and she has a strap around her wrist. There's an extensive amount of decomposition around her neck, which is important. We'll cover that later. And they find her pants and her underwear, which are not on her. They're unbuttoned and they're near her body, but not on her. So you can obviously see where they're going initially. They know this isn't like an accident. She didn't just fall off the four-wheeler and end up like this. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And she didn't have her own four-wheeler.
Right.
And you're right. She didn't fall off and her pants just fell off.
Mm-hmm.
So they know they know they have a homicide at this point. Now, because she's so badly decomposed, it's very difficult, even when they bring the body to the medical examiner's office, to determine a cause of death. But it was noted that there was a significant amount of larvae found around the neck area, which would be suggestive of some prior injury, because that's where they would go. If there was a cut or an abrasion there, they would naturally gravitate toward that area, which is critical when you're trying to figure out what happened to her before this all went down. And the strap is significant because her arm, when she was found, was kind of over her head, like she was being pulled by something. And that strap was still on there pretty tight. So these are all observations that they're making as they're going. And the second shoe wasn't found until maybe a few days or a few weeks later, about another 100 and 150 yards away from the body in another direction, which suggests that the body was scattered to some degree because the offenders were probably transporting her from something to another location, trying to get her off the ATV trail.
And that they just came off as a byproduct of that, of moving her body? Or did they place them there?
No, I think they fell off. And we can get to why I think that, and it was in the episode. But I feel like they wanted to remove any evidence that could indicate where she was. And the person's shoe being so close to the ATV trail is ultimately what helped find her. They didn't want that to happen. So that was a mistake. It's dark out. It's late. Right. You're in a hurry. And things might fall off of a vehicle or while you're walking or running away. Or, to not be too graphic about it, if she's being pulled by something, they could have came off while she was being dragged around the place. So it could be a couple different reasons. But I do think some evidence, specifically the purse, was probably intentionally moved and unfortunately dropped off, whether it was a vehicle or whether they were carrying it. They lost sight of it.
So it was so bad that she had to be identified through dental records.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah, the decomposition was severe. And I talked to Mark Brady, who was the lead investigator at the time. He was there, and he's a father as well. And he said it was one of the more difficult crime scenes he's ever seen. And she was in really rough shape. But out in the elements like that, you have, fortunately, there wasn't any animal activity other than the fly larvae, but she was still in rough shape. Yeah.
Just horrendous.
Well, I mean, when you're kind of half buried,
that's it,
in the ground, and for 2 weeks, with the weather, it's definitely going to do some damage.
And that's another point that I missed. I'm glad you brought that up. She was half naked, but her body was covered, right? So the clothes not being on her means that they came off more than likely before she was dead.
Yes.
So you have her body being covered by someone after the fact. She didn't just fall into these tree limbs. So the fact that they covered her, but the clothes were already off, is indicative that there was probably a crime prior to the homicide.
And they figured out, the investigators figured that there must have been a sexual assault that happened prior to death. Yeah.
One of the main questions I had was, were the pants unbuttoned? Now, they could organically just come unbuttoned if she was being dragged, because that's the argument, right? Like maybe they came off while she was being dragged.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. And then one of the first questions I asked, which I didn't find in the report, were the pants unbuttoned? To me, that's suggestive that somebody, either she did or somebody took them off. That's my theory on it. I can't tell you 100% that's what happened. It's also possible they just unbuttoned, which is why they came off. But
underwear too?
Exactly.
That I feel like that's kind of telling.
And in that moment, you can be open to multiple things. But as you start to put things together and talk to witnesses and other people involved with it, and they start to bring up things that indicate one of the two theories are more plausible, then you start to lean that way.
Right.
So at this point, when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, could have been while she was dragged, could be a sexual assault. I don't know. If I had to guess, I'd lean towards sexual assault, but I'm not going all in on that theory at this point in the case.
Were you ever able to talk to the medical examiner, or
Nope.
were they gone?
They wanted no part of the show. Because I wanted to go speak to them. The person who did it was retired, but I still wanted to go speak with them just to kind of, it would be good for the show to kind of see what would happen.
Talk us through your process.
Exactly. And from a TV perspective, it's good to see that stuff as well. And they didn't want to be part of it. We went there. There's actually footage of it, but I actually walked in and said, hey, looking to speak to someone, and they're like,
Like,
nope,
no.
and it didn't make the
Right.
it didn't make the cut.
Did you ever see the autopsy report? Or?
Nope.
Well, they
No.
weren't able to determine an official cause
No,
of death.
nope, they never did.
Yeah.
No, like I said, it's if I'm sitting here right now, I think it was asphyxiation. I think
Mhm.
she was strangled. I don't think it was manually done. I think it was more than likely because she had a ligature around her neck, which would explain the injuries to her neck. And we'll just say that when the autopsy was conducted, there were things that transpired that would be highly suggestive that there was a significant injury on her neck at the time of the incident. I'll leave those details out of respect for Tammy, but
Well, let's talk about Farlow Oil
Yeah.
a little bit more, and let's talk about who runs Farlow Oil, specifically Wyatt Farlow.
Yep.
And you actually went and talked to him because he
Mhm.
found one of her shoes.
that's right.
Yeah, pretty
And this
wild
is a-
scene in
yeah.
the show.
Also,
too.
because someone came forward to us, and it doesn't always happen, but they knew we were in town. Someone reached out to Tammy and said they wanted to speak with me, but they didn't want their identity in the show. I wasn't fake. That was an actual thing. I was skeptical about it, to be honest. Still a little skeptical about it. But yeah, that interaction that you see in the car, for anyone who hasn't seen it, this person's kind of disguised and
Voice change,
the
blacked
whole
out,
nine, yeah, like the typical corny,
Right.
cringy. It was
Yeah.
cringy. It was bad. I'll say it's my show. It was bad. So this person, they indicated that Wyatt Farlow and his friends would hang out at the gas station after hours and drink beers. And so when you're thinking about this theory that Tony dropped Judy off, then you start to wonder, were there people inside maybe saw Judy? Maybe that was who she was going to meet. So it's like, okay, where there's smoke, I want to go look into it and see if there's fire.
Yeah. And what was that experience like? It's a pretty wild scene on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely caught him off guard.
Yeah. In fairness to him, he didn't expect it. You see some guy coming in there with like this leather jacket on, not one of my
Yeah.
finest wardrobes.
Oh, you looked fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you went in there and you're like, I love your whole setup in here. I
Yeah,
love it. You're
trying to lower the guard a
Yeah,
little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't wear a leather jacket when I was investigating cases for the police department. Just put it out there. But that is the TV magic of it. But no, going in there, I wanted to talk to him. I knew who he was. I'd already looked him up, but I
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
playing the game.
Totally.
His grandfather or father used to own the place. The Farlow family is a very prominent family in that community,
Mhm.
very well respected, very well off financially. They own a lot of property.
That's kind
And-
of what we gathered
Yeah.
looking online. Like a lot of people were not happy.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. And in fairness to Wyatt, as I sit here today, I don't think he was involved in it. I think he did find her shoe. He also was the hunter who found the purse and the smell.
Yeah,
So when
let's break all that down a little bit
Yeah.
more.
So Wyatt was one of the hunters who smelt the smell of death and found the purse. He went and got police. And then weeks or days later after Judy was found, he found the shoe.
Crazy
So
coincidence. to find
it is,
both.
but
Yeah.
he also hunts in that area, and that's his
Yeah.
area. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it happens.
And it
And
wasn't that far away from each other.
it wasn't that far away. And, when I asked him about what he thought happened, which is a question I always like to throw out there just to see what people say,
Yeah.
he was quick to implicate Tony and David as well. And he said he saw him riding on the four-wheelers all the time. Was Wyatt a little cagey during that interview? Yes. Does that mean he's responsible for anything? Absolutely not. When you have 4 cameras in your face
Yeah,
and
of
some
course.
In your
Dude,
little
my
shop
little,
there.
my
that
little
you're-
leather jacket,
Yeah.
and you're like, who the hell is this guy
Yeah.
coming into my shop? I
Yeah.
had like a pound of gel in my hair, and it was just, I would have felt the same way. So he was he was taken aback by it, obviously, and
Yeah.
He starts smoking a cigarette.
yeah,
like,
he was
in one
struggling.
of the- yeah.
Well, because he knew where I was going with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you
I
say
was-
I'm here for the Judy Rawlings.
I was
and she's
transparent
like,
with him too. I said,
Yeah.
some people think you might be involved.
Yeah. No, you were.
What do you say to that? I wanted to give him an opportunity to explain himself, and my impression of him was he was nervous because of the cameras, but I felt he was being pretty transparent. He could have easily told me to go pound sand.
Totally.
Yeah.
You'd be like, get
Yeah.
out of my
Would have been well
shop
within
now.
his right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was willing to sit there and have a conversation with me, it doesn't say the whole picture, but
It's
I
a
also
lot.
felt like you have to develop a baseline for someone when you're interrogating them. And I had to factor in the fact that he was nervous because of the cameras
Yeah.
and because he doesn't know who I am. So once you take that out of the equation, I did feel like he didn't think about his answers. He wasn't really looking off too much. It felt like he was pulling whatever he was saying from memory as opposed to making it up.
Mhm.
And so I believed him. And could I be wrong? Of course. But I feel based on what we have, there's nothing to indicate that he was there that night. And I feel like the fact that he found the shoe and the purse in a way kind of makes him, you could say, oh yeah, he's he's pulling a double reverse here. He's
Yeah.
finding it, so he's not the guy. I don't think it's that deep. I think if he had a choice to do it over again, he wouldn't have found those items.
Yeah.
Because the person I spoke with wasn't the only person that thought he was involved.
Mhm.
So I don't think he's involved with Judy's disappearance or her death. And I feel like, if anything, he could know more than he's telling, but I think that goes for a lot of these small communities.
Yeah.
They don't like to open up to outsiders.
No. Yeah. And I think he was nervous too, just not only the cameras and everything, but just the idea that
The notion.
he knows, like, it doesn't look great that I found
No.
both of these items, and I don't want to be, people
Exactly.
thinking that I was involved. And it seems like a lot of people from what we've read online, just from the community, were just
Oh, they weren't happy with us.
angry. Yeah.
They weren't
yeah.
happy with us. But if I go there and I only follow the leads
Yeah.
that were followed by previous investigators, I'm going to come to the same conclusion.
Right.
I have to go in there and do my own investigation because
Mhm.
maybe I ask him a question or see something that someone missed.
Right. And it's at the end of the day, it's for Judy,
That's
you
it.
gotta cover all your bases.
It's not just a TV show where I was really down there trying to make a difference.
Yeah,
And
you
I didn't
absolutely
want to
were.
rely on the interviews that were done before me. That's what happens. If you go in and assume, hey, listen, everything they did up to this point's good, I'm just going to work off this foundation. Well, you're building a shitty house on a
Yeah.
faulty foundation.
Yep.
So I didn't want to go that way. And I had to go speak to him. I felt confident after speaking to him that he was being truthful, and you move on. You continue on to the next thing.
Yep.
But yeah, there were some people that weren't happy, but we spoke afterwards. It was fine. Spoke
Good.
to his family and stuff. It was good.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I reached out. I have nothing to hide. So I
Yeah.
reached out to him. I saw
Yeah.
the Facebook messages and stuff, and
Yeah.
it was getting a lot of media attention in that community.
Yeah.
And so the sheriff's department wasn't happy with me either, which is partially probably why they didn't speak to me much as I continued to try to get justice for her.
Mhm.
But I don't regret it.
No, I don't
I
think
would
you
do it
should.
the same way tomorrow. If I went down there and only focused on what they were focusing on, I'm only doing part of the job.
Well, I think your whole interview with him too was very fair. I
Yeah.
mean, you were definitely not trying to get a gotcha moment or
Yeah,
play any dirty. I think it was good.
he's fine. I've said it publicly multiple times, saying it here again.
Yeah,
I don't think he was involved in it. So.
Yeah. Good. I don't either.
So when it comes to Judy's items, you would think there might be a possibility to pull some DNA off of those.
Yeah.
What was the extent at which the sheriff's office looked into, that angle? Did they test anything or try to extract any sort of DNA from those items?
I know on her body, it was too badly decomposed to pull anything from there.
Right.
They thought about that.
Because they wanted to do a sexual assault test.
That's right.
To,
And they
to
couldn't.
confirm that, but you can't.
Can't do it. So you're left with the shoes, the purse, the strap, the underwear, the jeans, the main things. There was a lot of evidence collected. This is an argument I've gone back and forth with them on where there's like 200 pieces of evidence. Beer cans, trash bags, Ziploc bag, you name it, cigarette butts. Oh, we want to send it all off. Well, it's an occupied area. There's people throwing out their cigarette butts. There's ATV trails right there. 99% of the stuff there has nothing to do with Judy's case. So you got to focus on the things that
Yeah.
were involved in her murder and could potentially have been touched by the offender or offenders.
Mhm.
So to me, that's the strap, the purse, the two shoes, the underwear, the jeans. Before I got there, nothing had been tested. Nothing had been tested at all. And as we progressed in the case, I thought it was necessary to do it, but I didn't think we needed it based on everything else we uncovered. However, I said, let's do it. Let's send off that stuff. And before coming out here, we had spoken about this a little
Yeah.
bit, and I reached out to Detective Chris Manis, who's retired now. He's in the episode, and I'm sure his name will come up again.
Yeah.
And I remember the last time we spoke, he had said that the prosecutors wanted to send those items off for DNA testing before they did anything else. And when I called him, he called me back and was surprised to hear from me. It's been a few years. But he said he's retired and he doesn't recall if it was tested. He thinks it might have been, but he's not sure, which is when I said, hey, listen, I'm going on the show. We're going to be talking about it. And if it hasn't been tested yet and funding is the issue, we got it covered.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, great. Good to know that. So the last we spoke, he was reaching out to the evidence technician to see if those things had been sent off for testing.
Okay.
If they had, I don't know how lucky we're going to get with that because of the elements.
Right.
But if the offenders touched anything, it would have been one of those pieces.
Okay. Well, when we get that information, we'll definitely reach out and try to get them set up.
He
with a
calls me
whole
back
grant.
and says this hasn't been tested. It's going to be expensive and we can collaborate on it and we'll test
Yeah.
everything. At
Yeah.
least those items.
Yeah.
I think that's the best chance you have. Do I
yeah.
think we need it? No, but at minimum, it would rule out because I think the other apprehension from a prosecutor's standpoint would be, okay, let's say we don't test it. Someone gets charged and convicted of the crime. And then eventually they do. And sure enough, there's DNA found on that strap or those underwear, on the underwear or the jeans that doesn't belong to the person convicted. Why wasn't that done before?
Right.
So I respect it. I understand it. My pushback would be, why haven't you done it? Like, what are we waiting for here? Like, okay, I agree. Do it. So waiting for a call back from him.
Okay.
He didn't sound too sure that it had been done.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I think it might have been done. I would like to think that if it had been done based on how many headaches I caused, he would know for certain whether it was tested or not.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me because they did actually, back in 2001, they got a warrant issued in order to collect DNA evidence from Tony.
That's right.
And they got a bunch of different samples from him.
That's right.
So it's like,
They have his DNA.
Why'd you go through that whole process to get his DNA if you're not going to do anything with it?
Yeah, I think they were going to do the rape kit, obviously, but I know it's a funding thing. A lot of these police departments, I'm not saying it's okay, but it is very expensive. We did a test in Hawaii for one hair. It was $3,000. One hair.
Yeah.
So it can add up. When you have 200 pieces of evidence and you as the investigator have to choose what you think is the most likely to contain the bad guy,
like,
that's a lot of pressure.
Dark.
And so it's like, you either send it all or you send nothing kind of situation. But I do think we can concentrate on what we know. Like the strap doesn't appear to be hers. We didn't find anything that would suggest that belonged to her prior to this incident. That was used by the murderer. That's who did this. So where that strap come from, we don't know, but we know it wasn't on her body originally. Test it. Someone had to have put that on her wrist.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if they've done it. I would like to think they have by this point. If they haven't, hopefully after this episode airs, I'm going to hear back from Chris. And if it hasn't been tested yet, they will do it finally.
So just from your experience and being in law enforcement, because I think this is a big question for everybody, like, and it obviously varies per department, and this is a very, very small department, but where does that money come from within the police department to do DNA testing? And like, what's a typical budget for forensic testing? Or it just really depends.
Depends on the department. Sometimes it's budgeted in one of the line items. Not often, especially a department like that, where, especially at that time when the science behind DNA testing isn't as prevalent.
Right.
Grants, local donations, things like that can do it. Rewards that are put up by other, nonprofits like yours that will do it, that can come in and pay for the money. Now, listen, if it's a case that it's a new case and there's definitely DNA, the money will be there. Federal funding, whatever they got to do, they can get it. And they also, just like any government, can pull from other budgets to pay for it. They'll do it, even if it's just for the public, perception.
Right.
They're going to do
optics of it, yeah.
But with a case like Judy's, where it's highly unlikely that anything's going to come back from it, it's hard to justify $25,000, $30,000 for something where they may just go, nope, nothing there.
Yeah.
Nothing of value there. So I hate that it should never be the case, but sometimes financial restrictions do play a factor in whether a case is vetted all the way through.
Yeah, it's just the reality of things.
It's the reality of it. I don't like it.
No.
But it's the reality of it.
I don't think anyone likes it, but
yeah. But that's where we come in here and we can talk about it. And if it hasn't been tested, we will. But as we continue to go, let's just say for a second that it has been tested and nothing came back. It's not a dead end for me. I think there's a lot here that we haven't even discussed yet circumstantially that is more than enough to take this further. But that's why I'm here talking to you guys, because it hasn't. There's been no movement. So that's a problem for me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about theories for a second here. We've kind of been alluding to some of them. Obviously, one that I feel like in most cases you have to consider at least is this was a random crime of opportunity by somebody who just happened to be passing through this area or was just hanging out at Farlow Oil that night, that just saw an opportunity to do this and they did it.
Yep.
Where does this sit with you on likelihood?
So this is my original book when I was out there, and I have a whole 2 pages dedicated to just the transient, random person theory, because you're right, you can't exclude it even though it doesn't seem likely. It falls short for me for 2 things. What we said on the top of the show, the area where she was found would have been known to only someone who was local. So your your comeback to that would be, okay, well, it could be someone who wasn't necessarily known to Judy, not a friend of hers, but still familiar with the area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm with you. Now we have to get into window of opportunity. We know, according to Tony himself, she got dropped off around 11:30. Tammy came home. She wasn't there. By the next morning, she was already gone. Whatever happened to her happened in that small window. So immediately after being dropped off, if that's what happened, she would have had to have been picked up by someone. I can't sit here and say 100% that there wasn't someone in the gas station.
Yeah.
That grabbed. I can't.
There's no security footage or anything to confirm.
Nothing. And would someone inside that gas station know where she was and where to bring her, how to get to that spot? Yeah, I think so. So it's not a matter of completely ruling it out or finding something exculpatory in nature that would say it's impossible. It's just finding other theories that have more breadcrumbs that line up with the trail you're following.
Right.
Now, from a prosecution standpoint, that this could be a problem because a defense attorney is going to say this, right? It's your job as the prosecutor to make a strong argument beyond a reasonable doubt to prove that what your theory is the right one. And I do think with the evidence in this case, it doesn't necessarily discredit the random person theory, but based on the other theory we have, it does show a lot of evidence that implicates a certain individual, as opposed to just some random person who happened to be walking by at the exact time that Tony Sierra did not see. And, in the middle of the night, and it happened to be that at that very moment, this person was walking by this area or in the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't seem likely.
No.
So like in this area, there's no, is there train tracks nearby?
Yeah, there actually the train.
Is there?
Yeah,
Interesting.
Literally across the street.
Oh, that's right. He does mention the train
there's
tracks.
train tracks right there. You have to cross the train tracks to get into Farlow Oil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So could it be?
Is it possible somebody, hopped off a train or whatever? And
so they hop off the train.
Yeah.
They grab Judy, right?
They just happen to know she was out there and
in the middle of the night.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to find this location and they're not going to leave anything behind from themselves. Nothing at all.
They're going to know where.
More
to
than
go
likely
out.
they accessed it. And this is tough to explain. And even me talking about it, it's going to be hard. But where Farlow Oil is, the ATV trails are on the opposite side of it. And Judy was like somewhere in the middle. So even to get to it from Farlow Oil, you could do it, but I wouldn't want to try it.
Yeah.
It's not as direct of a route as if you were coming in from the opposite side, nowhere near Farlow, and happened to be using one of those ATV trails. So that's another reason why I lean toward the fact that the person who did this was familiar with those trails and more than likely was on an ATV, as opposed to someone who just walked into the woods in the middle of the night. But yeah, I have to be honest when I talk about it, like the theory about some random person, it's in play, but as we go through all the other pieces we have, it points away from that theory and towards another. So I don't think you have to rule it out completely. You can still entertain it.
So you don't think she ever left those woods? That she could have been taken somewhere else and then brought
secondary crime scene?
Yeah.
No, she was there. She was killed there.
Yeah.
She was killed there. Even the way she was found, she wasn't dumped there. If she had been dumped there, the shoes and the purse could have been found at a different location. It's possible that she wasn't killed right at that very spot where we found her. She could have been dragged around for a while. But again, based on what we know in the window, she was on ATVs at 11:30. She was found off an ATV track within 2 weeks, but it's very likely that she was killed within hours of being last seen because she didn't come home the next day.
Yeah.
So she was already gone. Or there's so many theories. You can explore the idea that she was held somewhere. She's in the same clothes. I don't have any evidence to suggest that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with what I have. And what I have is she was on an ATV when she was last seen. She was found off an ATV trail when she was eventually found. And her clothing, shoes in particular, were found near the ATV trail, suggesting that whoever was doing this was either dragging her around in that area specifically or dropped those shoes as they were fleeing the area. That's my theory. Maybe people out there feel different though. I don't know.
Where do you think the alleged rapes could have happened?
So it depends on how far you want to go ahead on this, because we can get into, you guys know what happens while I'm down there. Like, how far do you want to go with why I think there was a rape and what happened that caused her death?
Yeah, I guess we're jumping around a lot.
Yeah, because I mean, there's things here. But it's good to say it because based on what we've talked about so far, let's not hide the elephant in the room. We're talking about Tony and David as potential suspects.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about this transient theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both plausible at this point.
Yeah.
But then as we're going to cover everything else, this theory, as far as the transient, becomes far less likely.
Yeah.
And this one starts to rise to the top.
Yeah. I don't
But
think we
it's
need to.
it's the other things that come into it that lead us down this path.
Right.
So, as far as where the rape took place, I didn't know for certain that a rape did take place until other people came forward, until I found things in the reports and in the case files that suggested that that would have been the motive behind killing her. Because you do have to ask that question, right?
Yeah.
Why kill her?
Yeah.
What would be the reason behind it?
Right. So let's kind of walk the audience through that, because I think, we have no more to say on transient. We've talked about Wyatt Farlow.
Keep it in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I implore you to do that. But when the other
Sure.
things come out, you decide whether or not it fits the puzzle.
I think we should just dive right into Tony and David. Do you feel good about that?
No,
Okay.
Talked about Wyatt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
And
no
then
other evidence.
And
Really
the gas
nothing.
station theory. We talked about the random transient.
Mhm.
And now you have to talk about the last person to see her alive.
Yes. Okay. So let's dive right into Tony and David. So they're definitely the most likely culprits here. I feel pretty comfortable saying, in my opinion, I think they are absolutely responsible for this, allegedly, especially Tony Sierra. And in your mind, how do you think everything played out that night with them based on your experience talking to everyone and your time spent down there?
Tony and David said, hey, you want to go for an ATV ride?
Mhm.
There might have even been other people with them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
Honestly.
too. It seems possible.
Could have been 3 or 4 guys down there. And
Well, how many ATVs did they have?
they had a couple, but they've also been known to ride together, which we're
Yeah.
going to get into.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there could have been
she hopped on with
one of them.
One of them. Okay.
Yep. She hopped on with one of them. I don't know who, because nobody saw her hop on the ATV. All Stephanie Hinchman said was she walked over to them. And when she did, Stephanie left, and then she heard the ATVs later that night. But we don't have to take anybody else's word for it. Tony said she was on the back of his ATV.
Yeah.
That's his words.
Mhm.
So he was driving her, according to him, at 11:30 at night on the ATV. And that's corroborated by Stephanie Hinchman's account of hearing the ATVs around that same time.
Yep.
So what I think happened is they go down to the woods. Judy's there, as I said earlier. Amazing person, but someone who was impressionable and wanted to be liked. And David and Tony were slightly older. I believe they were 17, maybe even already 18 years old at the time. Hanging out with older guys, they're drinking. Maybe she's having a couple drinks as well. They're in the woods. They just, they're taking the ATV trails. And this isn't speculation. We're going to get into how I got here, but according to the people that I spoke with, they're in the woods and maybe 1 or 2 of the guys have sex with Judy.
Yeah, and I figured the audience the reason I brought it up so abruptly there is we've already been over the fact that her pants were off, her
pants
underwear
were
off. I mean, it's obvious to people.
Now, as far as
happened,
whether it was rape or consensual, I can't tell you.
Right.
I can't tell you.
Well, I mean, I guess
she's
I don't know.
16. He's
Yeah.
8. They would be 18. There's no way to know. There's no way to know. According to my sources, according to the confidential informant in the episode, he reveals his name. He doesn't even care. Michael Turner.
Mhm.
His exact words, not my opinion, but his exact words were, the guys had sex with her.
Yeah.
Doesn't say if it was consensual or not. After that happens, Judy starts to act differently. She's now regretful that she did this. Probably was convinced to do it. Probably was peer pressured. I don't think this was something, even if she said okay, I don't think this is something she wanted to do. And I think the guys were looking at her, maybe seeing her reaction to it. Maybe she said something where they felt like if she was allowed to leave there, she was going to tell people. And that would suggest potentially that it was not consensual.
Right.
Mhm.
To me.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to go further than what I have. I want to stay with what I have.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
Mhm.
If it was consensual, then why wouldn't you just say it was consensual?
Mhm.
But if it wasn't, and that would give them reason for concern. And at that point, they made the decision that she couldn't leave the woods. And based on what we have, we know that there was a strap around her wrist. We believe there was some type of ligature around her neck, probably removed after they positioned her or later where she was. And it's my opinion, my professional opinion, that she was dragged around on the ATV until she was killed. She may have been strangled beforehand. She may have been just dragged in there afterwards, but they specifically brought her into an area where she was not supposed to be found. And so I think that Tony and David probably came back, not when they said they did, and they left her there hoping that they would never be found. How I came to this conclusion is based on not only the confidential informant, Michael Turner, who's no longer confidential informant, he came out publicly, but also other individuals that I spoke with. I don't know how much you want to go into that. Danny Cecil.
Yeah, Danny
like that.
Cecil.
I was going to say, let's jump into Danny next.
I mean, there's so much here.
Yeah.
Like, because when they hear it at first, they're probably like, Derrick, I think you got a good argument for transient. I agree with you. Not until you hear everything else.
No,
and we'll explain Michael Turner more.
Michael Turner, we can get into it. There's a lot here. We are skipping around a little bit. I'm sure I'm screwing your
No, you're good.
Your vibe up.
No, it's okay. I mean,
you're like, Derrick, just shut up.
I think people enjoy that too. It's just a different style than we normally do.
But it's real.
I think this is a natural flowing conversation. There's a lot of emotion involved. I mean, you were there. So things are going to just come up as they go. We'll make sure you guys understand everything by the end. But yeah, let's start with David Cecil. Okay.
Danny Cecil.
Sorry, Danny Cecil.
This is a big one.
It is.
Yes.
Michael Turner's huge, but
this is big.
Danny Cecil, I will tell you guys, this was not planned. This was someone who just, I can't even take credit for it. My producer was just looking at houses in the area on the map and saw this house and decided to go talk to him. I wasn't even there.
Smart, yeah.
And just say, hey, did you see anything? And then this is what transpired. We'll get into it.
He seemed like a really good guy to just be
salt of the earth.
To talk. Yeah.
As credible as they come. Mm-hmm. The guy did not give a shit about the cameras. He didn't even want to be on camera. I would bet my life on it that he was telling the truth.
Yeah. And for a guy, who's living in a small town like this, you know how small towns are. Like there could be reasons that a lot of people like in his position wouldn't want to be on camera, especially talking about something like this.
Oh, he didn't care. He was one of those dudes. He's like, come for me.
Yeah. And he was like, I would testify in court. That
100%.
So
he didn't even know who Tony and David Sierra were.
Yeah, I know.
Which is even more important.
More credible.
Never heard of him.
Yep. So he is a local horse trainer who lived off of the ATV trails where Judy's body was found. And he said that shortly after Judy's body was discovered, he saw two boys riding the trail on the same ATV. And they were startled when they saw Danny and said that they were looking for their girlfriend's pocketbook. So tell us more about his whole experience talking to him. And were you shocked once he started telling you things?
Yeah. So I had a little bit of a heads up on this one where they were talking to him and he had said this story to the producer.
Okay.
That part of the story he did. The other stuff we're going to get into, he didn't. But he was riding his horse. They were looking down at the ground. And he thought it was odd because there were two guys on the same ATV, which wasn't something that was common in that area. He wasn't used to, he was like, that's odd.
Yeah.
So they were looking around on the ground, scanning the ground. And then they kind of got startled by him because he came around a corner and he said, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? And they said, oh, we're looking for our girlfriend's pocketbook. Now, just a reminder, the pocketbook was found the day that Judy that's how they found Judy, or that's what indicated to it. But the public.
By Farlow.
But the public did not know that purse was found at that point.
Right.
No clue how Judy was found. That was not public information. So my opinion is that these guys heard that she was discovered and said, shit, we got to go back and find these other items because it's going to tie back to us potentially.
Right.
So they were out there looking for it, not knowing that the purse had already been found.
Yeah. Yep.
Why else would they be out there looking for a pocketbook? How would they know? And if they knew that the pocketbook would have been found, why would they be out there?
Yeah. And how fucking stupid are they to just randomly tell?
I think they were caught off guard.
And
they were probably like, oh shit, we look suspicious.
And they thought by saying, oh, my girlfriend's pocketbook, not a big deal because Danny Cecil doesn't know anything. And we're talking years later where I'm bringing this up. Like this information isn't out there. But what was interesting about Danny was he had never heard of Tony, had never heard of David. And I had asked him, like, would you remember what these guys look like? Now, in a perfect world, I would have done like a 6-pack. That's the standard. I would add a 6-pack lineup, but I'm out in the field. I don't have that opportunity, but I did still try to throw him off. And a lot of people didn't get this when the show aired, but I was doing it intentionally. I showed a photo of Tony now, and he looks completely different. He's gained a lot of weight. He's gone through it, right?
Totally different. Yeah.
He looks nothing like the guy, but I wanted to see if just by me showing him a photo,
like, oh yeah, that's
him.
Yeah.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He was like, nah. He's like, he actually said he looks kind of, but he looks a little heavy. He was like, sorry to disappoint you. I
he
don't
said
think that's
the guy I saw was more skinny faced.
Yep. And then I pulled up the picture that was not from when he was 18, but around that time. And you could see his reaction for anybody who didn't see it. he had like this weird smirk, like, damn, okay, you guys aren't fucking around. Like, you know what you're doing. And he's like, that's him. That's one of the guys that were on the ATV. And he said he would testify to it.
Yep.
And I take that as, I'm sure enough to testify under oath that the photo you're showing me, and he didn't know the name. I didn't say the name of the guy.
No.
He just said, whoever that person is, that's the guy I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked him after the fact, and it's all cut together to be concise, but it was probably 20 minutes before I said, by the way, you ever heard of the name Tony or David Sierra? I was always going to be like, yeah, I heard these guys are involved. That could hurt me.
Right.
Because maybe he did see the photo before and he just doesn't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he didn't even know their names, it gives a lot more credibility to him. And so that doesn't necessarily implicate them, but it does put them at the crime scene a day later looking for an item that only the killers would know was there.
Yep.
So that's the start of like, okay, Tony and David have no more than they're sharing so far. And that's when I really started to focus my attention on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a huge moment.
It was a real moment. It was a great moment. I was all fired up.
It was.
Well, it's just like when I saw it, I'm like, the police didn't go and talk to every neighbor along this trail.
Never been spoken to.
That's crazy to me, because if everything went down kind of the way that you described it, I'm like, somebody must have heard something, or at least ATVs. There've been
and he had
more
been living
people.
there 28 years, by the way.
Yeah, that's wild, because his property's like backs up.
It's right there.
And
it's not too far.
Nobody came and talked to him.
So I'm not trying to defend law enforcement here, but because it's their own problem. But that's what I was talking about earlier, where there's no organization.
Yeah.
There's no filing being done. So people are just randomly running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And there's no
methodical approach to investigate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're just all trying to find good intentions. They just want to find her, but they're not doing it in a methodical way where they can dot their I's, cross their T's, and make sure that they're not only not missing spots, but also overlapping each other to a certain degree. I'd rather see him get questioned by two people than no one. So yeah, he said he had never been spoken to. Nobody had ever came and spoke with him. And I don't even know if they went and spoke with him after the show, because I was like, hey, have you spoke with Danny? And they said they hadn't. And that was probably 6 months to a year after.
How important do you think that piece of information is to the investigation?
What do you think?
Pretty damn important.
Yeah.
Like, as far as building a circumstantial case here, like,
yeah, I think it's critical. I think the fact that
probably warrants further interrogation.
Yeah.
And asking them about it, be like, oh yeah, so-and-so saw you guys here. What were you guys doing out there? And like, just pressing them. It seems like they needed to be pressed a lot harder than they were.
What are the chances that the last person to see Judy alive, the person who says he dropped her off, the last person to see her, would be out, would match the description of a guy who was out there 2 days later on an ATV looking for an item that only the killers would have known was out there? You tell me.
Yeah.
No
yeah.
chance.
You tell me. And if that was all we had, I like to play devil's advocate. I would say, well, still kind of weak, because it puts in there after the fact. What if they were covering up for someone else?
Right. Exactly.
But that's not all we have. So you continue on and you keep going, and you got to put them there. You got to get something out of it where there's information that people know that they shouldn't know, but they do because they were involved. And that's what I was looking for at this point.
Well, let's talk about Tony Sierra as a person.
Oh.
And also his long rap sheet.
Yeah. I posted him on my social media a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I saw you. You definitely put him on blast. Yeah.
I don't like him.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
I'm not a fan.
I mean, you probably won't be a fan either when you hear what all
You
the
notice I
shit
never
this
heard
guy's
anything
done.
about that, though, by posting it?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to open that can of worms, because then he would have to be deposed.
Yeah.
So I've accused him publicly and privately about my opinions of him and what he did, and never any lawsuits, nothing. It's interesting.
That is.
Well, here's something that happened shortly after Judy's murder. So in 2002, after charges of possession of stolen property, felony larceny, and driving while impaired, Tony was arrested for the first-degree rape of a child, which occurred the same year.
Interesting.
I think that says everything you need to know about this.
Best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Yep.
So you can tell what they have in them, something that's maybe buried in them for a while or hasn't been discovered yet. It's very indicative of what they were either doing beforehand or what they were thinking about doing. And when you think about this case and we think about the potential motive behind it, it's not only is it tragic what happened to that young person, but how it connects to this case.
Right. So we don't know the outcome of that case unless you do.
I don't.
But we do know, and this is where Michael Turner comes into the picture here, is that Tony shared a holding cell with Michael Turner during one of his arrests.
Yep.
And Michael Turner was actually on his way out
That's right.
and would have had no real benefit to sharing this information that he ended up sharing with law enforcement that we've been kind of alluding to.
Yeah.
And this was a piece of evidence. It was a recorded tape conversation that Michael Turner had with law enforcement about Tony Sierra.
Yep.
And this was just buried in one of those boxes you went through.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was for TV purposes, but it wasn't. They gave me the box. I was spending a lot of nights down in this like little corridor in the hotel, listening to the tapes, watching, looking at some of the reports and trying to see if there was a connection. And I came across an audio tape of Michael Turner. He was coming out of some holding area where he had spent some time with Tony Sierra. Like you said, he was on his way out. Tony was on his way in. And just for a little context, Michael Turner is not from that area. He's from like Clark County or something like that.
So he wouldn't have known.
He didn't even know about Judy Rawlings.
No, he
didn't even know about this. He didn't even know about the case. So he was someone where, and this is kind of a prison code type thing where you can be a murderer, a robber, an arsonist. They'll leave you alone. But if you do something to a child, there's a code, even in prison.
Mm-hmm.
They will handle you inside, or they will not protect you. And with Michael Turner, he, on his own, came to law enforcement and said, "Hey, I just want to share some stuff with you. I don't know this dude that well." But he came to me and he kind of confided. He was crying one day and he confided into me that he had killed this little girl. And he started giving them all the information about what Tony had said to him directly. Now, it's technically hearsay. That's true. But essentially, in this tape recording,
we can play it.
Yeah, let's play it.
You want to play it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Say, and when you first found this, I mean, did you go through every single tape that they had given you pretty much?
Fortunately, yes.
Oh my God, dude, you're so impressive. In 7 days that like after recording all day, you're probably exhausted. And you're spending your whole night.
I've taken years off my life because I was on such a time crunch. I didn't give a shit about the show, if I'm being honest with you. The producer would come on and tell you I was a pain in the ass because I did not care about the show, which pissed them off because I was never playing ball there. Yeah. But I was like, I told this fucking family that I was going to do everything. They're actually expecting something. I have to go see them on day 7.
Yeah. And say, you don't want to be like, well, didn't find anything. Sorry.
See you later.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it. So I felt this obligation to, if there was something there, I had to find it. And it was making me sick almost. Like I wasn't sleeping. So yeah, I was going through it. And this was probably like the 13th piece of audio I had listened to. And I honestly it didn't make much sense at first, but then I replayed it and I was like, I thought maybe it was something that was, I thought the date was wrong. I thought maybe this was something where more information came out and then he came forward with all this information. The stuff that he describes in this tape, none of it had been publicly released at this point.
Yeah, that's the main thing to keep in mind when you're listening to this.
That's the critical piece.
Gives it all the credibility in the world.
Yep.
And when you found this, were you just like, holy shit?
I immediately called down the producers, had them come downstairs and played the tape. And they were like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, Mark Brady, who was the lead investigator on, I'm like, just make sure there's security there because he's probably going to attack me. Like make sure he's there. But it was something where I was like, this is great. Now, is it a smoking gun? It's not a video of the crime.
Right.
I'm like, I was thinking he was going to tell me he already knew about it. And there was a reason why it wasn't credible.
He would explain.
Something like that. Yeah.
I thought he was going to be like, we heard it. We went there. We found out X, Y, and Z, whatever it was. I was like, there's no way this is what I think it is.
Yeah.
And, we'll play the tape and then.
Yeah, we don't have the video, but if you guys want to go back and listen to that or watch the actual episode,
you can
we have
see
the audio.
his live reaction.
Even if you don't watch the episode, I would strongly recommend this audio tape we're going to hear, but then I play this audio for the lead investigator who was in charge. He wasn't the one who did the interview. It was one of his detectives. But his detective they were interviewing a lot of people, hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And this is back to what the theme of this is, where there's no organization, there's no strategy to how they're doing it, there's no assignments. Everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. And there's things that are getting lost in translation that aren't being vetted. And this was one of those things. And so I played the tape for him. It's on video, and it's the first time he's ever heard it, and he was not happy.
Yeah.
Do you think he was more angry with you for finding it, or that you were showing him up?
It was embarrassment.
He was embarrassed.
Or do you think he was angry at all that this slipped by someone in his department and didn't get to him?
He had some choice words for the investigator on the tape,
yeah,
which didn't make the episode, and he was more embarrassed.
Yeah,
I
see why. It wasn't a great moment.
It was not a great moment. And I think there was part of him where it's like, this show's making me look dumb.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
But I do want to say Mark Brady's heart was in the right place the whole time. And he had to delegate responsibilities to other people.
Yeah.
And
it's not like it was all up to him to solve
it wasn't
this.
a tape I played where it's his voice on it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so when you have this massive multi-jurisdictional operation where you have agencies from everywhere helping out and you're trying to do it in the right way, you're relying on people to report things that are of value. Clearly, this investigator who talked to him didn't believe Michael Turner.
Right.
And that's why it took years later to say, hey, listen, this is something that we need to look into again. So,
interviewing Mr. Michael Adam Turner. Today's date is 3/17/2003. Okay, Michael. Tell me what the conversation was between you and Tony Sierra.
We were in a hold cell. We went to court. Okay. And he went in there for, I don't know what he was there for, in a hold cell together. And he was like crying or whatever, you know. And he said that she rode with him on back of a four-wheeler or a motorcycle when he was driving in the woods. And, no, sir. I can tell you there was a little store somewhere near where it happened because he said something about he picked her up at a little store. And he said that they went down there and apparently some other guys were already down there and they talked her into having sex or whatever and she willingly had sex with him. Yeah, and I guess whoever else was with him, if there was, he made it sound like there was at least a couple other people. And then after she had consensual sex, she decided that whatever she had done with them or whatever, she started acting crazy about it and like she didn't want to, like they raped her or whatever. And then he got scared about it. And I asked him, you know, y'all killed her? And he never did say he killed her, but he said they tied a rope around her neck and pulled her on back of a motorcycle or four-wheel, whatever he was for her. I don't know exactly how he tied her up, but I know that he said something about her neck, and that they covered her up. And he said that.
Did you ever seen Tony before?
No, I was like Northfield, High Point area.
Did you ever hear anything about this case?
No, I've never even heard anything about it at all.
All right.
all right.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. You can leave.
Holy shit. Yeah. And if you, I know that may have been kind of hard to hear. If you're watching video, we will put captions so that you can read along. But fucking insane.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious. God, I have so many questions. But do you think? I have my own theory, and of course, this is just my opinion. But I don't think. I think it was a rape. I don't think that it was consensual.
For the reason you said a little while ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that he told Michael that it was because he knew, just like you said, like
prison code.
Right. Like so yeah.
You can't say I raped this girl.
Right.
Because now he's still in prison.
He felt the
Completely
need
agree.
to like have some emotional release about this, be able to talk about the guilt from it to somebody, but had to make sure he went about it in a way that made him look a little less bad.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Oh, yeah. He's just trying to protect himself. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's
he's
all it
not
is.
going to say he's a rapist in there because he'll be dead.
Yeah.
So think about what we have there. 2003. This happened in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So 2 years.
Yep.
Not much has been released publicly. And in that small little recording, he says that they were on ATVs.
Yep.
He kind of mentions Farlow Oil a little bit. So there's probably some truth to that where maybe they drove by Farlow Oil or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. There's some connection to Farlow. That's the only real business over there.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about them tying her up by the neck.
Yeah.
Nobody knew
that
she had damage to her neck. They talk about covering her up. And he mentions, because he's not 100% sure, which I like, motorcycles or ATVs. He's not 100% sure. This isn't something that he knows definitively. He's telling you what the guy told him. And this is coming from someone who didn't know the Judy Rawlings case, isn't from the area. And at this point, and there was a reward, but he wasn't looking for a reward.
No, there's nothing for him to gain by
And I
saying
will
this.
tell you this. I had a lot of conversations, more than I care to remember, with Michael Turner because it was a seesaw situation. But even when the reward was higher, when I spoke to him, he was like, I don't want the reward. Never wanted it. So I don't think his motives were that. And I was pushing. I thought this, as compelling as the Danny Cecil thing was, I thought this was the most compelling. This is as good as you're going to get as the smoking gun, because this person has guilt knowledge from an individual who he doesn't know at the time, but is the prime suspect in this case.
Yep.
Now, why Tony revealed this to him, who knows? I don't know. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There's got to be more to it, but There's no way, and this is right from Mark Brady if you watch the video, there's no way that this man could have known that information unless he was there.
Yeah.
And we know that Michael Turner wasn't there. He couldn't be there. So that leaves Tony Sierra, who told him. And it's one of those, I keep saying it's one of those situations. And it puts you in a spot where you have to decide, is that enough in totality with everything else we have? I thought it was. I'm thinking about it in totality, circumstantially, it's enough. And that's where get to start jumping through the hoops with all the politicians. And I went out to dinner with them, the things you guys don't see. Like I was really trying to play politician, but.
What was the DA's perspective on you coming in?
He didn't mind it, but he was apprehensive about it. And, it's one of those things where they're looking at it from the outside saying, what are you going to do in 7 days? When I sat down with him, he seemed like he was very interested in what I had. I had a whole presentation laid out. It wasn't in person. It was over the phone. And I gave him all the PowerPoints and everything, gave him Danny Cecil's interview. We gave him the raw footage, on Michael Turner. And from what I understand, and this is where it starts to get a little hairy between me and the Randolph County Sheriff's Department, I was calling every day. Like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
From the feedback that I got, the prosecutors wanted to do the DNA testing. They're like, yeah, this is great, but how do we know who did it? There's 4 guys there, maybe 3-4 guys there. How do we know which one killed her? And I don't disagree with that, but we do have enough for an investigative grand jury at this point.
Which, will you explain that for those that don't understand what that is?
So an investigative grand jury is when a group of individuals from that community will get together and they have subpoena power and they can look into the specifics and the details and the facts of the case to decide whether or not there's enough to indict a particular person. So at minimum, what you would do with this is you would allow them to subpoena Tony Sierra, David Sierra, Stephanie Hinchman, maybe any other individuals that could have been with them that night, and have them all put their stories on record. And from there, you can decide whether or not who's telling the truth, what you have, whether or not it's enough. But I believe, based on what we know, the person who was there who didn't have any direct involvement would rat the others out because they don't want to go down for murder one.
Right.
That's my hunch. But if the grand jury came back and said, you know what, we think we have enough for an indictment, then you go for it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, then you just have to live with it. I think Tammy, at this point, from our conversations, would live with that.
Yeah.
But the fact that we haven't tried is mind-boggling to me.
Me too.
And there's other cases where the investigative grand jury, I've recommended it, and it's not something you want to do right away. But if you have something like this where in totality it seems like enough, I think if you've exhausted all of the resources, it's the next step. If the DNA hasn't been done, if it has been done, then no doubt this should be what happens. But if it hasn't, then we'll pay for the DNA. We'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll get that off the list.
Yep.
Now let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's keep the ball moving. Because if I had to guess, since I left in 2019, not much has been done. That's my guess. And I hand fed them Michael Turner. Like I was like, here's his hand. Here's your hand.
Right.
I'm giving you his number. I want to step back from this because I have no authority here. Anytime I'm involved, people are going to question it.
Yeah.
Because I'm the TV guy. So now that I've done my part, I don't want recognition. I just want you guys to get together and do it. Re-interview him yourself. Whether that was done or not, I don't know. And that's where the frustration came in with this case. I was glad to hear that Chris Manis was willing to talk to me again, and we talked. But I will tell you, it came to a point where I'm not friends with them. I don't work for them. I'm going to hold them accountable just like I would anybody else. And I told them directly as a police officer, I felt like they were doing a shitty job. Nobody wants to hear that. So I won't say we had a falling out, but they were just less responsive to my calls and emails. So after a couple of years, you give up on it. You don't forget about it, but you move on.
What else can I do?
There was nothing else I could do.
And you don't want to cause harm too. And potentially really make sure this never moves forward.
Correct.
Because out of spite. You
Correct.
know what I mean?
In your opinion, what do you think the lack of motivation is? Is it out of spite at this point? Or
I feel there's a saying, right? Like I'd rather see 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to prison for a crime he didn't commit. And a lot of people, and I don't disagree with that notion, by the way, like you don't want anyone to ever go to prison for something they didn't do. So when you have attorneys looking into this and there's any possibility that it could be someone else, they are apprehensive about moving forward because one, you only get one shot at it. You can't go if they're acquitted and something else comes out later, you can't double jeopardy. You can't do it.
Right.
And they also, if there's any possibility that this transient theory or that it could be one of the Farlow people from that, not even the Farlows, but like someone who worked there, if that hasn't been fully vetted, they're apprehensive about pursuing anything. I think with everything we have, we can rule them out pretty convincingly and direct our attention at one specific person, maybe two. And I think if you put him under oath, he'd screw up. And we haven't even talked about what he's currently in prison for.
Yeah. In 2020.
Yeah, let's get into that.
So, I mean, because I did call them again after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have an update on that.
Yeah.
So on July 13, 2020, deputies responded to a call regarding sex offenses against a child that happened the day prior. And Randolph County Sheriff's Office arrested 36-year-old Tony Sierra Jr., who was arrested at 12:20 a.m. Wednesday, July 15th in Greensboro. And then he was transported to the Randolph County Detention Center and was held on $2.5 million bail. But he was charged with felony statutory rape of a child by an adult and 2 counts of felony statutory sex offense with a child by an adult.
Seems to line up.
So we have a repeat offender.
Yeah.
He's just continuing doing what he's always done. And what's kind of the state of where he's at right now?
You guys are looking into it too, but I was under the impression you got 30 years for it.
So I couldn't find any official numbers for like what he actually got. You're the only person I know who has like actual numbers.
I'm pretty sure he got 30 years for it. Pretty good. It's done. It's
You would
adjudicated.
assume so.
It's adjudicated.
Yeah.
And when I reached back out to them, I'm not going to say names. It was like, well, he's gone for a long time anyways. We got to devote our attention to other things. Like we got him. And I'm like, yeah, you got him, but Judy's killer hasn't been caught.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if he's the guy, then he's in prison, but not for Judy's murder.
It's amazing that they don't understand that.
Now, it wasn't said directly like that, but that's what I read between the lines.
Yeah.
And that conversation didn't go well. And so I just think about Tammy. I'm like, would she be happy with that? It's probably him. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life on an unrelated crime. I'm good with it. I wouldn't be good enough for me.
No, fuck
So
me either.
And I know I'm sounding like a broken record here. You have multiple pieces of circumstantial evidence putting Tony there before, during, and after from different witnesses that are not connected to each other, that have no relationship with each other, all saying and directing us towards the same thing.
Who had no prior knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're going to talk about it, but to kind of rounding this out, we talked at the top of this episode about Tony's alibi and how that was kind of the thing that prevented anything from going forward in the future.
Right. Because you called Tony's mom, or you were trying to talk to Tony himself.
We were at it. Frank was at his house.
Yeah, he was surveilling his house.
He was calling us and he's like, I know Derrick's looking for me.
Because you were hoping to kind of catch it.
I was going to confront him.
Yeah.
I've done it in other episodes. You guys will see it, and I've definitely caused the lawyers some problems. But episode 1, I literally confronted a guy that I believe molested and killed a girl, and I pretended I was buying his car.
Wow, really?
So I was looking for that opportunity, but he knew I was there. He was ready for me. And to be fair, everyone's got a gun down there, and I was like, I'm probably going to get shot if I do this, because we were out in the middle of nowhere. But I was able to get in contact with his mother, and I explained to her why I was there and explained to her that I just wanted to hear his side of the story. And I genuinely did.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I hadn't come to my conclusions that I ultimately came to. And so she was nice enough to get on the phone with me. It was early in the morning. If you watch the video, it was literally like 6 a.m.
Yeah, it's on the episode.
She was going to work. And we had a long conversation. Not a lot of it made the show, but the big thing was we were about 2/3 of the way through, and I knew some of the questions I wanted to ask. I just had to ask him at a point where her guard was down and she was going to be honest. So at one point I asked her, like, Tony had that alibi for that night. You were there. He said that you got home from work, and she stopped me. No, I wasn't home. I was working 3rd shift. His dad was probably there, but he'd be sleeping by then. So it completely discredited his alibi. She wasn't there. He told law enforcement she was. She wasn't. She might have even told law enforcement she was. She maybe forgot it. But now you not only have all of this that we've already discussed, but the one thing that would prevent someone from saying, yeah, it's Tony, was this alibi. And now that's in question as well. So that was kind of for me where I'm like, this is all kind of pointing to one person, and I'm just the messenger. And that's when I decided it was day 6 when we got to that point where I was like, I want to sit down with the Randolph County sheriffs and talk about everything because I thought we had enough.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah. I didn't expect them to go make arrests that day, but I thought there'd be like, hey, we got to go interview Danny. We got to go interview Michael Turner. We got to go talk to Lisa Spencer. We got to go talk to all these people and do what you did, but now ourselves, because it can be admissible in court.
Right.
What I did, I could testify, but it's better to get the information directly yourself, which is what I wanted.
Well, when you played the tape
Yeah.
of your conversation with Tony's mom and Manus's face
Yeah.
said it all,
Mhm.
because you could just tell that he was like, oh, shit.
Yep.
You
Even
know?
Mark Brady wasn't really looking at him. He was like, yeah, I know.
They look real dumb.
Yeah, it didn't look good. And now, in fairness to Chris Manus, he wasn't there.
Right.
Mhm.
He was not there. He's the guy now. But I think he felt, in fairness to him, a little set up,
Mhm.
you know, because he's there. Now he's representing the department. And like you just said, they look dumb.
Correct. Yeah.
And he's looking at Mark Brady like, where was the heads
What?
up on
Yeah.
this one?
Yeah.
I thought I was coming here to hear this kid talk about, like, you know, how he ran around for 7 days and it was going to be a puff thing and we're going to move. And he's pulling out evidence that's in our locker room that I should know about. So
That you gave him.
yeah, that you gave me. But he was receptive. I like Chris Manus. I do. And I think he has the right intentions, and I'm a fan of Chris Manus. I feel like he's hindered by others. Not necessarily in that department. But just like in my position when I was a police officer, there were times where I wanted to charge someone and ultimately the AG would say no, even though I felt I had enough. That's the give and take. So if I had to put the blame at anyone right now, why it's kind of in a standstill, it's not him. It's more the DA's office that's holding this one up. And they have a lot of cases and they're not always worried about this particular one. But I'm glad that we're doing this because it kind of like got my juices flowing again, where I opened up the book and I reached out to him not thinking he would call me back. And he did. And like I said earlier, they have the DNA. They have the evidence that I discussed earlier, the jeans, the underwear, the strap, the shoes, the purse. It's all been preserved correctly, we hope. And if that's the case, it can be tested. I would recommend, if it hasn't been tested, that be tested. And once that's tested, regardless of the results, you convene a grand jury.
Yeah.
That's what I would recommend. And I've said this to them. Nothing I'm saying to you guys, I haven't had conversations with them about. It's not just for the podcast. And I think they get a little, I guess, pissed off when like I'm telling them what I would recommend because I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so
like, who are you to tell us how to do this process?
So maybe there's a little bit of an ego thing there. I don't know, but I'm hoping that can be put aside. And if the DNA hasn't been tested, they will allow that to happen. Who knows? Maybe they test something and as unlikely as it might be, they do find something.
Right.
Now imagine if it comes back to a Tony or a David or one of their associates that has recently been arrested for maybe another crime and is in the system. It could be something where there's Joe Schmo who was with them and helped strap her up, maybe didn't participate in anything else other than that, still bad, obviously.
Yeah.
And they get his DNA through IgG. He comes in and gives everyone up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Stranger things have happened.
Of course.
So the fact that nothing's being done, at least from the outside, is a problem.
Certainly seems that way. And are you surprised by that? Or like when you left, did you think things were going to move?
I thought within a month I'd hear about the arrest.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. I thought within a month that they'd be calling me saying, hey, we need you to write a statement for this, this, and this, and we're going to go for it.
And for reference, this was 2018 or 19?
2019.
19. Okay.
Yep. 2019, I believe I was there.
Yeah.
So yeah, some time has passed for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he's been convicted of another crime before that. I mean since then. And
you think that probably just kind of like tabled things?
I think they're kind of like, he's gone. He's not going to hurt anybody else.
Doesn't matter.
But
do you think Tammy knows that he's?
Oh yeah, I talked to her.
Yeah.
I reached out to her first thing. And we haven't talked in years. But I mean, partially because of me. Like, what am I going to tell her? In my opinion, I failed on this one because it didn't result in anything. Honestly, I came there, the case was unsolved. And when I left, the case was unsolved. And as I sit here with you, the case is unsolved. So I'm glad she let me be part of it, but still same result. So
I don't think you can consider that a failure. I mean, you made some serious
yeah,
I mean, you've got to be proud of what you did. Seriously.
No. I wish I could say I would for the podcast. I'm glad we made movement in it, but I always think about what I could have done differently. Like, was there a conversation that I had with one of them where I could have big brothered it a little bit more? You know, because there were points where I got frustrated because they were jerking me around, basically.
Yeah.
So you do get frustrated. And there were points where after a while, wasn't initially where I was like, you know, get your head out of your ass and do something, like do your job,
Yeah.
you know? And that's obviously, you get more bees with honey than vinegar. And so there are things where I question that, and I've had time to think about it. And based on how much time has passed, they could have waited for my thing to have kind of dissipated and then taken all the credit and done it themselves. And yet they still haven't. So the more and more time that goes by, I don't think it was something that I said or how pushy I was. I think it was more so a combination of them being reluctant to move forward with anything because I feel like they know that this is the right scenario. This is what happened. But I think they're cautious because they believe, based on multiple accounts, there was more than one person there. And you can't just throw out a blanket murder charge. You can't just say, well, there's 4 people there, so we're going to charge you all 4 of you with murder and hope we get the right one. It's not how it works. And I appreciate that. But if that's where we're at, where we're down to 3 or 4 people, get it in a grand jury and let's try to get it down to 1 or 2.
Yeah, at least.
That's
so there's no negative to doing that for them?
Well, the negative is if they decide not to indict the people, unless there's like something new, like it has to be overwhelmingly like different than what they've already presented, you can't do it again.
Gotcha.
Once that's final, that's final.
But how many years are going to go by? But that's
great
the thing.
question.
It's like
2001.
You think
it's 2024.
20 plus years is what? The 40 years from now, they're going to be like, all right, we're ready to do the.
We're ready to do it. Tony's in his deathbed.
Yeah.
He's on life support. But you know what, Tammy? I hope she's still here, but she may not be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what justice is that? So there's a balance. And I think your audience will feel this way, which is okay because they're right. You don't want to go after someone who may be innocent, but you also don't want to wait so long that when you do finally have that opportunity, that if you're right, it doesn't really do anything.
There's no impact.
There's no
virtually.
impact.
Yeah.
There's no impact. So it's a fine line. And I think when you pose this question to your audience, there's going to be a divide there.
Yeah.
There's people who are more conservative and people who are a little bit more loose with it, where they're like, hey, go for it. And there's others who are like, listen, unless you know for certain that it's him, he has that right.
I'm so excited about our next sponsor because this is a product that I truly stand behind. I've been using it since before they were sponsoring us, and I've had such an incredible experience. I've recommended it to so many family and friends, and that product is Nutrafol. After I had my daughter, I experienced so much hair thinning and shedding. It was making me super self-conscious. I started looking into all these different options, and that's when I found Nutrafol. I decided to give it a shot, and I had amazing results. Your hair is never just about your hair, and Nutrafol knows that. It could be about stressors in your life, like dating, your diet, the juggling act that parenting can be, finding your rhythm and new routines, or even just following your favorite sports team during an intense season. It could be almost anything that has almost nothing to do with your hair, and that's why Nutrafol takes a whole body approach to hair health, addressing problems inside to help hair grow on the outside. Physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients, Nutrafol's women's hair growth supplements are clinically tested to multi-target key root causes of thinning, including stress, nutrition, and lifestyle. Nutrafol has multiple formulas that are tailored to give your hair what it needs to grow throughout different stages, such as aging, parenting, as well as for different lifestyles, such as plant-based diets. With Nutrafol, building a hair growth routine is simple. You purchase online, there's no prescription or doctor's visits required. They offer free shipping and automated deliveries to ensure that you'll never miss a day, and you can see results in 3 to 6 months. So address your root causes of hair thinning with Nutrafol, the hair growth routine that keeps up with your life. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter promo code MileHigher. That's Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MileHigher. Once again, Nutrafol.com, promo code MileHigher.
How do you guys feel about it? Putting you on the spot.
I mean, I'm the more loose with it type.
So that's great though. And I love...
Probably not. I mean, I don't have a...
But I'm on the other end, so I think it's good to have that balance.
Yeah.
because as a cop, like I think I know in my gut that he's responsible for this, or he was there at least. And so that's just my opinion. Nobody else's, not Mile Higher, but that's my opinion. I've said it publicly on TV. I can't say it anywhere else. Yeah. Anywhere who listens, I say it.
Yeah.
But I also have to acknowledge that I can't say for sure he was the one who tied the strap around her neck.
Right.
Is that a problem? Yeah, I can admit that. But the fact that we haven't at least gone the whole way to say whether or not we could prove it was him by questioning him, questioning the people he was with, that's a problem for me.
Just follow every single potential.
That's it.
Yeah.
If you come back to me and say, listen, we did the grand jury, they said no.
Then
I hate it, but I can live with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had cases on Breaking Homicide where we arrested a guy in Seattle. We arrested a guy because of my investigation, and it went to trial. And the judge ruled in his favor and said, you know what? He lied to you. He lied to Seattle PD. He was there. He assaulted her. However, she had cocaine in her system. So I can't say definitively that it was not the cocaine that killed her, and instead of the asphyxiation, which I believe he suffocated her. He strangled her. I hate it. I was on the Zoom when they read the ruling. I was on the same Zoom with with the victim's sister, who I was close with. Kills me, but it's done. I can move on. I know we did everything we could.
Yeah.
So,
do you think that this is just the criminal justice system playing out, and this is how it should be? Or do you feel like there's better ways that we could go about doing it? Because obviously it seems like with so many of these cases, especially cold cases, it feels like the system's prohibiting justice from being served in a lot of cases. And sometimes that's based on processes, procedures, the element of the DA's office and the politics behind that. You know, do you think there's any hope for reformatting the way that criminal justice is conducted to reach, you know, more accurate results, but also get more convictions and convictions that actually are credible and, you know, not just convicting somebody because, well, it seems like he's the guy, so let's just roll with it. Like for me personally, I think this is very tough because, like you just said, I have no way at this point in time. I have no way of knowing if Tony or David were the ones that actually did this to Judy.
Fair.
All I know is that there's a good likelihood they were there.
Yep.
Based on the
everything we have,
the previous events and other eyewitnesses, but there is that possibility in my mind that, you know, was that, you know, thinking about what was their mindset for that night. Were they taking her there because it kind of goes back to this conversation we were having earlier of like, was there any premeditation there? Because to me, it's like these two guys, they're neighbors with her. They've had prior interactions with her. To me, I see maybe some premeditation there if it had just been the three of them, because they took her out there, and if they weren't meeting anybody there, then what else were they there to do? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And also, if this whole sexual assault's going down, it's really hard to think that there had been other people there, and those people are just unnamed to this day. There is not a single clue to anybody else being there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so difficult for me is like there's a few things missing here, and I understand why they might be hesitant to want to push this through so quickly, because there is that possibility you get to the end here and you're like, there's not enough to convict. But then there was somebody else that actually did it, that actually maybe drove the four-wheeler, or put the ligature around her neck, or whose idea it was in the first place to kill her, because maybe they had consensual sex with her, but then somebody's like, dude, we have to get rid of her because she's gonna go rat you guys out to the authorities, and so this is what we need to do. Was there somebody else there? And there's no way to know that based on everything that we have. And I think it's frustrating because it feels like more could have been done at the beginning to eliminate that aspect, and there's just not enough was done, in my opinion, to rule that out at this point. But then it's also difficult because it's like, at this point in time, 20 years later, what are you supposed to do? We we could figure out who those people are, but they may not even be around anymore. They might have moved, or who knows where they could be. So
Good
it's
chance, yeah.
it's just cold cases are just so difficult for that very fact of like there's so many variables and factors that impact it. And I mean, I give mad props to you and to every other investigator that works on cold cases, because it's like got to be the most frustrating.
It's not fun.
It's going to drive you mad.
It's not fun.
I would just go nuts. I mean, I just talk about true crime. I've never actually worked a case or anything like that. But to me, it's Michael. Like, that part just gets me so much. He had nothing to gain from that.
And by the way, it reminded me in there, because I didn't remember the part where he was like, oh, it was consensual. So that was another thing where Tony might have been like softening the landing by saying, oh, it was consensual. It was, to try to make himself look better.
Right.
But I agree with everything you said. And that's the difficult part, is like feeling a certain way, but understanding that there are limitations in this case, as there are with many cold cases, because of the original investigation. Yeah. And a lot of what you were saying, in fairness to everyone involved, is what they were saying as well. So I acknowledge it. I'm not sitting here with tunnel vision saying this is the perfect case. I think the only thing that can be done, and I've said it like 7 times in this episode, and there's no guarantee it's going to go anywhere, is to do the DNA. You have no harm by doing that. If it hasn't been done, send it all in for testing. Worst case scenario, it comes back and it's just there's nothing they could pull off of it. That's done. If they really believe that Tony and David potentially were involved with this, convene the grand jury, take your shot, put your best case forward, see if the jury agrees with you. If they don't, maybe before you go there, you have a conversation with Tammy, you let her know the risks involved with it, and understand that if this doesn't go the way you think it might go, that's it. You have to be able to live with that. And that's what I would do. I don't think anything else has come forward to suggest it was someone else. I don't think it's up for debate whether or not Tony and David were there. It's a matter of how much they participated.
Right.
So at minimum, what you're getting out of that grand jury hearing is putting them on the stand to have them recount their chain of events that night. And
potentially mention who else was there.
Mention what was there. And also, let's see if they say again, and I don't know how much he listens to podcasts, but now his mom has contradicted him.
Yeah.
So how is he going to deal with that?
Yeah.
What's his alibi now?
What was he doing for all that time?
Yeah. But you do pose a bigger question, and it's the justice system in general. And I've had the luxury of being a cop where I was looking through one lens, and now I'm a civilian, and I'm a private investigator who frankly doesn't get treated any better than you guys would if I go to a police department now. I thought I would, but I don't. So I've seen both sides of it, and I can tell you it's not what I thought it would be, for sure. And the justice system is flawed.
Yeah.
I was to say it. And I don't know if there is a perfect system. I do think, and this might surprise you, I am someone who is conservative in the sense where I'd have a harder time dealing with the fact that someone I investigated was convicted of a crime they didn't commit.
Yeah.
Thinking that an innocent person went to jail for even a day because I got it wrong.
Yeah.
I've had people who I know committed murder get off. I'm okay. I did my part. But the other side of it would be harder for me to accept because I'm responsible for that. I basically killed parts of their life. So if I were overseeing this whole thing, I do think we have to take a more conservative approach, kind of like they are doing in a lot of these cases, including Judy's. But with Judy's, I do feel like they haven't done everything investigatory wise before putting it to bed. And that would be the grand jury. It's not bringing them to trial. They're not charging them. They're not making an arrest, but bringing it to the grand jury, doing that last step, putting them under oath, seeing what they say. Maybe they say nothing. Maybe they don't say anything of value. But when it comes to the justice system itself and going to trial, shockingly to some of your viewers, being a police officer, I am okay with the fact that everyone, not even okay, I implore everyone to focus this way on it, is everyone's innocent until proven guilty. Mm-hmm. Period. Regardless of what you know. And that includes Tony. But there's things that haven't been done in this case that could be done that may change people's mind. That's where I fall on it. But the justice system, bigger question.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer. I don't get paid.
Yeah. I'm really interested, just before we wrap this up. Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful that technology will aid law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
And clean up a lot of the human errors that happen.
It's happening already.
Yeah, it is already happening. And artificial intelligence, I think artificial intelligence is something that could greatly benefit police departments and law enforcement across the country, especially because one thing that's always, when you look at a lot of these cases, it seems like if the police aren't conducting it in a methodical, logical way, and they're not also utilizing all the resources at their disposal, i.e., contacting everybody in the vicinity, having, coordinated search efforts, things like that. That's where I feel like technology could really come in handy. And because they would say, well, we don't want to release stuff to the public, because maybe we're building a case against somebody. We don't want them to know about it. But just gathering tips and information from the public, it seems like there needs to be more of a collaborative effort. And maybe this is where the system is prohibiting this from happening, to where they're able to process tips and information from the public. Like had they gotten the information from Danny sooner on in the investigation,
they could have questioned Tony and David about it then.
I feel like that's going to give them a good reason to go sit them down and let's talk about it. And because it seems like they needed to figure out their timelines better and not just assume the alibis were, stuck.
Agreed.
And if they had dug into that a little bit more and gotten a few more tidbits of information from the public and those surrounding those ATV trails, they might have been able to push this far enough to where they would have felt comfortable enough to, convene a grand jury or even just straight up indict one of them.
Yep.
And so that's just my 2 cents. But
no, I'm glad you're coming from it. Like, you're like, man, I get it. Like, it could go one way or the other. Likelihood, if we're putting money on it, these guys are involved. Right?
Yeah.
But that's the big difference between, well, listen, when you're talking about civil cases, preponderance of evidence, more likely than not. When a criminal case, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Is there doubt here? I don't think there's doubt that they were there. The doubt becomes, who was the one that actually did it? That's the doubt. Which one? Was it both? Was it one? Based on what we know about Tony now, I would think more than likely he was involved. But what I think isn't enough. But yeah, no, it's an interesting case. We kind of bounced around a lot, but hopefully everyone followed it.
I think so. And if you still feel confused, definitely go check out the episode of Breaking Homicide.
It's done better than the way I explained it.
Yeah, I don't know. It was definitely interesting to hear your take on everything in a more casual setting.
Good news is, though, to your point, science and technology is much better today than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder and harder to commit a crime and not be caught.
It is.
And a lot of the cases we're talking about are older cases before the science and technology, where they're still going back and solving those. Mm-hmm. So as time progresses, silver lining here, it is getting better for us, where we may not have these types of stories to tell in the future for newer cases, because when that happens, it's like within a day or two, a lot of these cases, they're solving them.
Yep. Fast.
So that's the one good thing to know, is going forward with the policies and procedures and the practices that go on in a lot of police departments, the training that's involved with as far as preservation of evidence, how we store it, how we test it. It's gotten a lot better, and it'll continue to get better as time goes on.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for sure. I think law enforcement's going to only improve, and I think training, resources, and technology are going to help aid it. I think, like you said, you're reading notes, handwritten, chicken scratch to try to decipher. There's no organization, and now there's whole systems, everything. Technology is going to really help make it easier to hopefully solve these cases. Yeah, one unified database, sharing information among different
everything's
agencies.
Digitized,
right?
Yep.
Transcribed,
helps a lot.
Everyone gets the same packet.
So
that would be nice.
Yeah, seriously.
I would like to wrap up today's episode. We do have a call to action for you guys. You can be active true crime consumers today. But before I explain that, we have a clip of Tammy Schmidt talking about how her daughter's murder has affected her. And this is back from 2019 when you guys recorded. But I just think it's important.
Yeah, this was actually a local news story that ran after Breaking Homicide. I actually mentioned it here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's Tammy giving her thoughts, obviously, about how it's affected her, but also just the case. So
it's no closure. It's, that person's out there getting to still live their life, but my child don't get to live her life.
She's been without her daughter for nearly 18 years. Someone murdered 16-year-old Judy Rawlings in October 2001.
Her body turned up weeks after she was reported missing in the woods not far from her Sophia home. Tonight, there's a renewed effort by Randolph County deputies to solve this cold case.
WFMY News 2's Alma McCarty learned how advances in technology are making it possible.
They came and said that they had found a body. I knew it was her.
Tammy Schmidt had a bad feeling long before Randolph County deputies showed up at her door on October 19th, 2001.
I had told them all along I felt like the boys had done something to my child and that they needed to get out there, and find her.
Someone killed her 16-year-old daughter, Judy Rawlings. A hunter stumbled across her body in the woods 2 weeks after she disappeared.
She was partially clothed. There was nothing left of my child. Animals had already been eating on my child.
It was nearly 18 years ago. To this day, no arrests, no charges, and in her mother's eyes, no justice.
Was not her time to leave this world. And the way that she had to leave this world, it's wrong. It's wrong.
It's essentially just like it just happened. The pain and it never goes away.
Justin McAdams, a Randolph County Sheriff's investigator, says this case is cold, but they're not giving up. Detectives are revisiting the facts and evidence,
As the handwritten notes
people down, and re-verifying statements.
We are attempting to take advantage of some of those gains in technology. I can say that we do have a piece of evidence we're interested in that we have sent back off for some advanced testing.
Schmidt is hopeful there will soon be justice for Judy.
I think we're going to get it solved this time. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I think that what he's referring to, and I'm not going to say too specific, but it's what we were already kind of talking about. As far, it's not like rocket science. There's a purse. There's items that more than likely the offenders would have touched. And so those items were probably sent off. I don't know if re-sent off is the right word, but I've never seen that guy before. So that's the first time I've seen him. That's not Chris Manners.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was like,
I don't know who that is.
Justin
I have no clue who
Schmidt.
that is. He could be part of it. They may have just sent him out to do the
right.
That happens to the rookie detective too. But yeah, but this was shortly after, and it's unfortunate that it takes a TV show to kind of get the ball rolling again. But and that clip kind of sucks to watch too, because she was optimistic there.
Yeah, totally.
So that pisses me off.
Yeah.
Like now I don't want to go to dinner tonight with you guys. I'm kidding. But it's like, yeah, that pisses me off.
Yeah.
Honestly, because you can see it in her eyes. She got glasses on, but she's like,
there's a glimmer of hope there that we're close.
Yep. Yeah. Because when I left, that was the impression.
Yeah.
That there was like a lot to do. I wasn't saying when I left, I got it. You're welcome. Have a good day. I was saying you guys have a lot of work to do. You got to go talk to all these people. You got to analyze all this evidence. You have a lot of stuff that you have to go do now, because I have all these names and information that these interviews need to be conducted by you. Mm-hmm. Photo pack, give a photo pack to Danny Cecil. There's a lot that could have been done. And I thought that was going to happen when I left. And I can't 100% say that it didn't. But if it did, I guess I was just wrong and it didn't result in anything. I find that very hard to believe, though. And based on speaking to Chris, I don't know. It looks like it might have just kind of, once I was gone and I stopped putting the pressure on, it's on to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see. Hopefully now we're covering it here. You guys have a huge platform. And hopefully, regardless of what this show does, I've talked to Chris and I'm going to follow up with those calls.
Yeah.
And I know you got some other stuff you're going to get to, so I'll shut up.
No. You're all good. We've got plenty of time.
But I can see what you're going to say here as far as your call to action.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I'd like to utilize our audience here. Obviously, we want to partner with Derrick and figure out if the items have already been DNA tested. But if they haven't, let's get that done. And then also, for those of you out there, we've had great success with people reaching out to the DA. Of course, what was the phrase you used? Bet more bees
with honey than you do with vinegar.
Totally.
I like
especially
that.
with DAs, I feel like.
Yeah. Because they obviously think they're the smartest people in the room.
Yeah.
And some of them are. Some of them are not.
So as we always,
and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So if I'm saying that, they're pretty dumb.
But yes, I know you guys get fired up. But as we always say,
don't come. Yeah,
don't come in hot.
I would say if you're going to structure it. Heard about Judy Rawlings' case. I would like to see any evidence connected to the case tested for DNA, and potentially based on those results, a grand jury convened.
Yeah, yep.
That's it.
We don't
want Tony's head on his. He's not going nowhere.
Right.
Let them just do their job. But I wouldn't go in there firing off like, how dare you and all that. Because
No.
they will
Please.
just close your email out.
Yeah.
Then you're done.
No, we're going to have a template for you guys in the description box or in the show notes where you can even just copy paste it into an email. But also if you want to make the phone call to the Randolph County District Attorney, which is 336-328-3010. And we'll have kind of like an example script. Obviously you can say what you're going to say, but please just, it helps.
Yeah, because they'll just close it out. But I do think in conjunction with that, I'm following up with Chris as well, and he's retired, but I'm going to make sure that I confirm whether or not the DNA items were tested. If they weren't, we have some ideas.
Yeah.
We're going to collaborate on it. And if we're saying it right now publicly, like if that's the problem, 5 pieces, I could give you the numbers. It's probably gonna be pretty expensive. We'll get it done.
Yeah.
Between Criminal Coffee and how do you pronounce it? It's Mile Higher Foundation?
Higher Hope
Foundation.
Yeah.
We'll get it done.
Yep. Absolutely.
We'll get it done. And then that's off the table.
Totally. Then we can
put it to rest.
We know we've done everything we can do.
Forensically.
They've got to take it. Take it to the next
and then
step.
if they think, okay, let's go for the grand jury, great. If they decide not to, you respect it and you move on. But if there's any world where we're sitting here right now, if there's a case where it's sitting on someone's desk and it's just collecting dust, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yep. And that's unfortunately likely what's happening.
I hope you're wrong.
But I hope I'm wrong too.
I hope you're wrong. We'll see.
Well, if you out there have any information regarding the murder of Judy Rawlings, please contact the Randolph County Crime Stoppers at which is available 24/7 at 336-672-7463 or call the Randolph County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigations Division at 336-318-6682. And there is a reward being offered, and it's for $5,000. So
$10,000.
Keep that in mind. Oh, okay, because they added
Office
an
of the
additional.
Governor offered a reward amount of $5,000.
So $10,000 in total.
Crime Stoppers is another $5,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. So.
Well,
thank you so
Derrick,
much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
You were just...
We could do these every day, these cases.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if there's another case you want to bring to our platform anytime, let us know. You're always welcome here. And we just had such a great time with you. Like I said earlier, I think it's just really refreshing to be around someone who's really so passionate about these cases, just wants to see justice for more victims out there. And it was an honor to spend time with you today.
Great to be here. It was fun.
It was fun.
It was fun,
really
and
fun.
it's let's hope there's a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Let's hope at minimum just get some people off their chairs and
seriously
doing something.
Let's get the blood
I think it will be
pumping.
We're proud of our audience. They make some moves. So.
But yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you for tuning in, and keep on taking your mind a mile higher.